All right, so what an extraordinary day. What a wonderful way to start the new year in our school board meetings. Welcome to all of our new elected officials. It's exciting, I know for you, it's exciting for us. So we're looking forward to great things together. We do have an agenda for tonight's session, and I believe there might be one modification. So, couple modifications. So,
Madam Chair,
yes, sir.
it is suggested that we add an item between the superintendent's report and the consent agenda, entitled a discussion. And under discussion would be all the items that are currently in the consent agenda. Mr. Davis has appropriately pointed out that the way that things are structured right now, the board doesn't have the ability to have a discussion about items that are eventually requested to be placed on the consent agenda. And so if there may not be any discussion for certain items that would eventually become consent agenda items.
Right.
But I think Mr. Davis is appropriately asking if we can have the space for discussion first, then request the board to consider consent agenda. I think it would make for a more fluid flow of the meeting. Mr. Davis, if I'm not capturing what you suggested, please tell me.
So point of clarification, because as we go through each item, we have discussion. Is this a discussion prior to the consent agenda about things not on the consent agenda? Or are these things, okay, Jared, mute your phone, please. Is it gonna be, are these things that are not part of the consent agenda?
The way that the agenda is currently structured, if we adopt it formally the way that it's laid out, there really isn't any space for discussion. It's either the board accepts the consent agenda or not. And Mr. Dave, again, I'm speaking for Mr. Dave, but please jump in and others jump in. But the way, I don't think it's been consistent in regards to if we're allowing discussion for each item or not. And so Mr. Davis's suggestion is, let's create just a space where it says discussion. And then the board can decide which of those consent agenda items you want to dive deeper into. You make certain items consent you want, no one has a question around, therefore you don't have to discuss it. But there may be other under your consent agenda that you may have questions around, and you may want to have a discussion. I think that is the request.
That's been my experience, but okay. You got to say, Mr. Worden.
That's not following the agenda, because you have 9 consent agenda items here, and we go through them line by line. Why add another discussion? I don't even know whether that it's following parliamentary procedure or not.
Actually, I think it's Mr. Worthy. I think it's actually more procedurally accurate to have the discussion item first, and then to allow the board to decide after discussion if you want to go with consent or not.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with what you're saying. And again, I don't think there's a problem, because I really think that's what we've done.
We have not done it consistently.
Okay,
Sometimes we have
so
said,
I'm good with doing it consistently. I'm perfectly good with that. We good?
Yeah.
So my question is, does the discussion then come with each consent item as it normally should? So when we have approved field trips, we discuss field trips, right? And then we have Head Start, early Head Start, we ask questions and we discuss Head Start, early Head Start. Am I following you correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so,
That's what we've done all along.
okay, I'm good.
okay, we have not done it consistently.
Okay, so we'll do that
Sometimes we have
consistently.
said, just move the agenda forward.
I'm good.
Let's not talk about it.
I don't have any problem.
So then do we need to
with
change it,
system.
because that is our procedure? We should, do I need to add this, or we just need to do I call for discussion? Is that what we're asking me to do?
You could say maybe consent agenda following discussion.
Okay.
I'm just,
Okay.
unless you think it needs to be a separate item.
So we will modify this to modify H to say consent agenda with discussion, is that right?
That
Can
would
we
be
do
great.
that? Is that acceptable to everyone? Can I get a motion?
Well, we haven't called the meeting to order, have we?
Oh, yes.
Oh, have we? Oh, okay, definitely.
Motion by
moved.
Mr. Davis, do we have a second? Second by Dr. Maddox, all in, question? All in favor? What are you saying? How many we got? Everybody, fantastic.
No, I'm not.
Opposed? Opposed?
Yes.
I'm ready. Opposed? We have, okay, great. So that motion carries. So we will add to our consent agenda, the title consent agenda with discussion to make sure that we are consistent. Awesome. And I will say, what I want to do is move the superintendent's report up, because under that space, we need to sign up for committees for 2019. And so now that once we adopt this agenda, then we will move to the superintendent's report, at which time Dr. Means will elaborate on some of the duties of the different committees, so that if you have questions, we can kind of answer those questions, and he will talk to you about what his staff does with that. And then I have this wonderful sign-up sheet. Where is it? You know how hard it was for me not to sign up for the things I wanted first. Very hard. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this, where are we gonna put this? Where do we decide we're gonna put it?
You decide and I'll put them up.
All right, we're gonna put this up for you to sign up for the committee that you want to serve on. We have a maximum of 4 members to any committee. The 5th person gives us a quorum, and that defeats the purpose of the board. So 3 to 4 members for each committee, and then we'll talk about each one of those. Now, do we want to stop and do that now, or shall we wait till after the meeting to do that? No, we need to do it all at one time.
I would work around.
Well, you said the superintendent's report, and
So it's gotta be during the superintendent's report.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do. All right. So Dr. Means, I'll turn it over to you. Oh, I'm sorry, did we adopt the
No,
agenda?
we haven't moved the superintendent's report.
We don't have to.
We're gonna leave it at G.
We're gonna move it up.
Right.
I don't think we have to have a motion on that.
I think you do.
I do. All right, may I have a motion to move the superintendent's report to after B, amend and adopt agenda? I need a motion to move the superintendent's report. Thank you, Dr. Knox. Do I have a second? Thank you, Dr. Gant. Do we have questions? All in favor?
I don't have a question, but I don't think that was necessary to do that. You just move it up. It's already on the agenda. You're just moving it up. But anyway, go ahead and carry the motion.
Great. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you so much. This is so much fun now. I'm feeling the pressure because you're on the phone, Jared. Okay. All right. So,
Now, a question
yes.
with the committee selection, is that a separate item in the agenda?
no, that's part of the superintendent report. So Dr. Meeks is gonna tell us about the superintendent, about the committees, and what the work that the staff does to support us on those committees. After which we will put the sign-up sheet. I'll give it to Dee now so she can go ahead and put it up. You can start thinking about which
Because it
one you
doesn't
want to
require
do.
formal action of a board.
Let me also say that I have
It just-
prepared for us by
Whatever.
Dee, these fantastic calendars that give you the dates of the meetings that are already set by calendar, to kind of know what your calendar will look like. So I think there should be maybe.
Can I,
Yeah.
Chair, can I ask a question about the calendar? Because now that we have new members on board, if, it would seem like to me that each committee may change the time of the meeting. So I wouldn't want a new member to feel confined by this.
No worries.
Because if we have a new member on the committee, then certainly they're going to participate, and to do so, they have to have it at a time that that the other three in themselves can
I
participate.
totally agree, and I think what I really appreciate about Mrs. Boddicker doing this for us is to kind of gives you I like picture worth 1,000 words. I like seeing this one page view of how busy the schedule can be. So these are the scheduled dates that we have so far. We change our dates based on the committee's needs and preferences all the time. We've already changed the policy committee to second Monday. We've changed the finance committee. So if something needs to change to accommodate schedules, then we are perfectly empowered to do that with joy in our hearts, because we want you there. All right, Dr. Means.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, we haven't adopted the agenda yet. 'Cause I had two things I wanted to add.
Did we not vote for that?
We voted to move the superintendent.
I am failing miserably at this. All in favor of adopting the agenda?
We
We had questions already.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Yes.
It has been established with a work session that we don't have to adopt and amend the agenda. In fact, it was agreed upon that we only vote on items that were a necessity to vote on. We've never done that. But if you all want to start doing that, fine with me. Talk about consistency, the big C, let's be consistent in what we do. First of all, follow Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, I apologize then. All right, so we have a motion. Who's keeping up with me? We have a second. We were in the question period. Have we answered all questions to everyone's satisfaction? Yes, Greg.
I would like to make two proposals for to add to the agenda.
Sure.
For the item.
Yes, sir.
And I would suggest it under I, other agenda items. One is that we have tentatively scheduled, I say we, the Government Relations Committee, has tentatively scheduled a legislative town hall meeting at the end of the month. And I would like for that to be a discussion item.
So would that be discussed when we get to item I on
Right.
the agenda? So we don't have to amend the agenda to have that discussion. It just would be one of the points of discussion under.
And I also would like to discuss a January 22nd meeting in Macon on waivers.
Okay, so you will bring those to us under other agenda items. under
Right,
I.
right, those two items.
Perfect. And anything else? We'll fold it right in there. Okay. Any further questions? Okay. All right, so now- all in favor of adopting our agenda as proposed? Opposed, like sign? We are unanimous. Thank you. Dr. Means.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In front of all board members is a listing of what the staff who support the committees of finance, government relations, and policy deem to be some of the responsibilities for those committees. The staff supporting those committees felt it would be prudent for new board members, but also veteran board members, just to have a sense of what those committees do. There are two other board committees. One is property, the property committee. The property committee doesn't meet as consistent as these three committees. And in essence, the property committee works to oversee the acquisition or the potential sale of property when deemed appropriate or necessary from board action. And then finally, there's a committee, which is the superintendent evaluation committee. That committee is responsible for overseeing the human resources function of the one employee of the board, which is the superintendent. Those are the five committees core committees that you have. There are additional committees of external representation of the board on either external committees or community groups, which I believe is also, and I'll know Ms. Vodka is on that. So there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different community committees as well. It's the Athens Area Foundation is the first. It's the Community Oversight Committee. The Community Oversight Committee functions in conjunction with the Property Committee in many ways. That's the committee that there are community members who oversee the projects that the SPLOST department is functioning around. So monthly, our director of SPLOST meets with a group of community leaders to talk about the progress that's happening with SPLOST projects. There is the Head Start Policy Council. Karen will get into more about the role of the Board of Education with Head Start and Early Head Start in a few minutes during this meeting this evening. But having a Board of Education representative on that policy council is really critical. We have the Foundation for Excellence, which is a a fundraising arm to reward and to recognize the excellence of our staff members across the district, and to have a board of education representative on that committee is always valuable. And then we have the Georgia School Board Association delegate. There is a meeting of the Georgia School Board Association annually where all the different school boards present resolutions that eventually becomes the legislative agenda for GSBA. And to become that delegate means that you're going to go to the convening of all the board members across the state of Georgia and listen and eventually vote on all of those different resolutions. Ms. Thornton spent a lot of time at our last board meeting also talking about the fact that there are other ancillary representative opportunities with GSBA. That delegate role is specifically for the legislative resolution portion of things. I think as other things come up, there will be opportunities for us to identify a representative from this board. Those are all the opportunities that are available for sign up.
If I could just make a comment, I've been the FFE, the Foundation for Excellence representative, but I can't do that this year because of teaching time conflicts. So if someone's interested in that, please, I think that would be a good slot, especially maybe for a new board member. Yeah.
Good pitch, good
So
pitch.
these committees, or these representation spots, they have fixed times, right? Because they're decided upon by the outside.
I think they're more fixed than what we do as a board.
Right.
That would be my impression.
If we don't have any board members interested in replacing you, John, and reading the president's email today, and that's Jared, and I guess he's listening, that he said that he would be interested in doing that.
But not with a passion. All right, so good.
But to answer your question, yes. I
Yes,
think there's
it is
less-
a fixed.
There's
time.
less flexibility with the community.
All right.
And are those times are up there that they meet?
Yes.
Some of them.
Okay.
For the
yes.
ones that are defined. Now, I am the representative on Envision Athens currently, and that was to be a 2-year commitment, and the board can choose to not send me back for another year. But that one has various meeting times and lots of opportunities in 14 different categories. So that one kind of takes up a good bit of time, depending on how much you can commit to that one.
I think you should go back to the consistency.
Well, I already know where to get them forgiveness.
So with Envision Athens, you go to all the meetings for all of the areas?
I serve as the chair of the Professional Services Subcommittee, and that's the committee that evaluates the overall Envision Athens implementation coordination. I'm on the budget committee there as well. And I have plugged into I'm on the Educate Athens, which the entire board is invited to that. The public is invited. They're all public invited to all of these, but those are actually positions. And so with Envision Athens, there are some funding members. So as a school board, we have paid to be a part of that, and we pay for our seat at the table. And so our commitment entitles us to 1 seat at the table. That doesn't mean anything because we're sucking up resources in the district because of the things that we have to do with the Educate Athens and the initiatives that are out there. So it just gives us an opportunity to say, too fast, too much, something, make it happen. Yeah. So good. What other committees did we have? We didn't talk too much. Dr. Meese has told us about the 5 standing committees. That's by policy that we must support. And if you guys haven't gotten involved with board docs, I hope you have. Have you been introduced to that? Awesome,
Yes.
awesome tool. Then he has been phenomenal in supporting us in that. But all the policies are there. They're very easily accessible and much easier than what we had before because you can literally go to just that one and not have to scroll through a lot of things. With that said, that list would we modified our policies to have these as voluntary committees where everybody signs up for them instead of them being appointed by the president. And so we've never fleshed it out to see, what happens if we don't get enough people signed up or if we get too many people. We haven't done any of that. So we may have to do some more modifications once we get the signups in. Because there's certain committees you certainly don't want to leave unattended. Yes,
Yeah,
Mr.
I also
Davis.
wanted to clarify for the second new board members that in terms of, even if you're not on one of these standing committees, you are able to come and participate in the discussion. Just when it comes to a vote, that you just can't vote for only those 4 members. So
And it's not an official meeting if you don't have quorum. So if you're on the committee, it's important that you be there, because otherwise we've wasted staff's time and everybody else's time. It's hard to reschedule because our schedules get pretty tight quickly. So looking forward to some exciting times ahead. All right, with that said, do we want to stop now and go and sign up for committees?
Why not?
Let's do it. Everybody grab your pen and race to the board, to the door. See, if you, okay, the slower you get over here, I'm telling you, your best spots are gonna be.
no, I would sign up.
Three. Oh, y'all need 3 committees.
Well, 3 committees are positions.
It doesn't matter.
3 is.
Everybody gets 3. Everybody walks away with 1.
No,
3. Sign up for
3.
You gotta sign up for 3. So pick them wisely. We can't cover with Tony.
We signed up for tier 2 or item,
Yes, and you have to be careful, put a C beside your name, and we'll see if anybody challenges you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So now our president is an ex officio member of every committee,
Not chair.
but he's not chair, he's an ex officio member, right?
that's correct.
But he gave us permission to assign him.
Here you.
No. I'm just saying, when I said before, the time and the date, not now.
We'll see how it goes.
Yes, sir.
I don't think I own that.
I understand. Yes, sir.
13 years, I did it, but I don't drive.
I understand. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, I know this is secret. We'll all talk about all of this stuff, you know, and we're gonna make it work for us. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I don't think I did three, but okay.
No, this is three over there.
Oh, come on, Greg, come on, work with me. So if somebody wants to sign up for 4 committees, you are more than welcome to sign up for 4 committees. So don't feel shy about that. And if somebody added a 5th person to your committee, somebody will be calling you. All right, and we probably spent a good bit of time on that. How you feel about it so far? Everybody's good? You know what I didn't see is a lot of people signing up for chairs, so I'm going to ask our president to appoint chairs. Would that be easy?
I thought there were two.
Well,
You see, appoint, it just makes us crazy, doesn't it? But how long are we gonna spend on this, right?
Well, Charles, you signed up for finance chair.
I
Yeah.
did.
I signed
Also
up for
property.
policy and property.
Yeah.
Okay, and I signed up for policy.
Yes.
You signed up for chair on policy?
Just stay away from appointing now because we wrote.
All right, that's what we said, we're not gonna do that.
Yeah,
All right,
you
so
violate the policy
we
on
need to
that.
make sure that somebody's at chair at each one of those spots.
Yeah.
So there'll be some follow-up phone calls, I
Greg's
think
gonna
we're good.
do government,
Yeah, the government.
and you signed up for superintendent.
Yes, and I signed up for chair.
Well, there, we got our 5 children.
You're good?
Just don't need 5 people.
Who's got finance? Who did finance?
I did.
Okay, good. Well, we can't have finance. I want to get this policy committee.
Greg explained it, but he didn't say why. Secret again, I don't know why.
Okay, this is really good. How we doing? We got somebody in every spot? Because the other thing that we didn't do last year, guys, is we did not do a vice chair. So let me say that we need to go ahead and appoint a vice chair in case something happens to that. Not appoint. Your committees need to select a vice chair,
Those will be.
and we need those done, you know, within the next 2 weeks.
We'll get that done.
We don't want to be in a position where we don't have a committee cover. You good?
They'll figure it out.
All right.
Now, I'm signing up for somebody else.
We had so many thoughts about
And
All the way here.
Okay, so yeah, I'll be happy to read it out. What we have is for finance committee, and guys, make sure that you signed up for these committees. Charles Worthy is our finance committee volunteer for chair. John Knox, Lakeisha Gant, and Kara. Did I get it right?
Mhm.
Kara. Thank you, Kara. That's our finance committee. For our government relations committee, we have John Knox and Greg Davis. Neither one of you said chair. Which one of you wants to be chair and the other one vice chair? Chair? Great. You good, John?
Yes.
We can have 2 more people on that committee. And
Who else signed up for it?
that's it. So we'll appoint Jared there. That's 3.
Ask him, not
You've got
appoint him.
Corey. I mean, we'll put Jared here. He told me I could put him here. I don't need to.
Okay.
I'm filling in Jared's name. I am not appointing anyone. I have no power to do that. Got it. And as you all know, we'll all be at the government relations meetings. You need to know that. It's just what we do in order to be in touch with our legislative bodies. Okay, Policy Committee, Tawana Maddox, John Knox, Chair, Greg Davis, Lakeisha Gant, and Linda Davis will be at your meetings because she likes policy. And Property Committee, we have, y'all need a vice chair for policy.
Greg, are you on that?
I signed up.
Okay.
Oh,
You
you're
vice chair?
I'm sorry?
I'll be vice chair.
Greg.
Less
Okay.
than my old.
For Property Committee, we have Mr. Worthy, Jared Bobby, and Linda Davis. Mr. Worthy is the chair since Jared is, I will be vice chair for the Property Committee.
And we only have 3?
We only have 3. We need a 4th person if you'd like. We can have 3.
But didn't I put my name down?
No, sir. Not
But
on
I
this
asked you
one.
to put me on there.
You on 1, 2, just 3 so far. You want to be on the Property Committee?
Sure.
I'm gonna write your name. I have a witness that Greg asked me to put his name down here.
Why?
Lots of
What?
witnesses. Okay. For the Superintendent Evaluation Committee, we have Charles Worthy, Tawana Maddox, Kara, and Linda Davis. And Linda Davis volunteered to be chair. Do we have a volunteer for vice chair?
I'll volunteer.
Thank you.
What committee is that?
Superintendent's Evaluation. And then our community committees for Athens Area Foundations, thank you, Kara. I am gonna do this Kara forever, which
It's
is
fine.
No.
Kara.
Kara, thank you, Kara, got it. Slow brain. Community Oversight Committee will be Tawana Maddox and Jared Bybee. Early Head Start. Greg Davis is volunteer for Early Head Start. Envision Athens, Linda Davis. Foundation for Excellence is Jared Bybee. And for GSBA, Lakeisha Gant. Did anybody not hear their name called 3 times? We'll
How
check
many
with you
committees
later.
we have,
We have them all done.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
How many committees we only have 3 people on there?
We don't have any with just, well, we only have 1 committee with 3 people, and that's the government relations.
Well, Charles was on last year. Charles. Step up.
Let me sleep about it tonight, okay? I'll let you know, seriously.
Going once, going twice.
Let me think about it.
Well, we want to be done with this though, right? So before the end of the meeting, can you think about it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We appreciate that.
Oh,
It would be so nice for Jared not have to come back and revisit that. That was awesome. Yes, sir.
I was just writing down, could you please go over who was on finance and the 4th, there were 4 people on superintendent and I didn't get them all, so.
So on the finance committee, Charles Worthy is the chair. You guys need to elect the vice chair, John Knox, Lakeisha Gant, and Kara. Kara Dyke.
Does Lakeisha or Kara, do you want to be vice chair? I'll do it then. If you need. I'm already vice chair, so. Okay.
Vice chair
so that-
policy. And then the last one that you asked about was
Superintendent.
superintendent evaluation is Charles Worthy, Tawana Maddox, vice chair, Kara, Linda Davis, chair. That wasn't so bad.
No?
Y'all give yourselves a hand, a round of applause. That is great. It is done. Woo-hoo. We didn't make it that far last year. Yay. Okay, what's next on our agenda?
We're still in the superintendent.
Yes, sir.
B.
And I
Dr. Means, would you like to continue?
I yield the floor to Karen Hickenbottom as a part of our participation in the Early Head Start and Head Start program. We have to have an annual board governance orientation for the Board of Education, and we'll make these slides available to the board and to the public. But Ms. Bottom has a presentation to present to you, and hopefully you'll have some questions at the end where it says present.
You want us to pull that podium out for you, Kim?
You need
I
the
don't
podium,
stand
or-
still that well,
Okay, good.
but thank you. This is our annual governance training. Essentially, the purpose behind this is that the Clark County School District Board of Education, you are the governing body for the Head Start Early Head Start grant. And so the work that you do for the school district is also the work that you do for the Head Start Early Head Start grant. You must participate in an annual training in order to ensure that the program, fiscal, and human resource management structures provide effective management and oversight of all Head Start program areas, the fiduciary responsibilities to enable delivery of high-quality services to all recommended content areas. And this is the official language of Head Start. So I apologize for reading a slide to you, but that's where. The purpose really is to promote school readiness for our low-income children by enhancing their cognitive, social, emotional, and developmental skills. This aligns perfectly with our school district goals and allows us to ensure that our learning environment support children's growth and that we have the provision of wraparound services for our students. Dee, do you mind clicking on this top video clip? Have a quick video. We won't watch the full thing, but. I'm sorry, I don't. Can run.
You wanna drive?
Oh, no, that's all right. I was just gonna see.
It's confused this mouse.
Sorry, that's all right. We'll just freeze on that. I apologize. It will be attached to the slideshow, and you can have an opportunity to view it later. It essentially gave the history and the beginning of Head Start programs and had some of the participants speaking about the possibilities that had been availed to them because they had the opportunity to be in the Head Start program. Our Head Start program services that we offer here in Clark County include with Early Head Start and Head Start. Within the Early Head Start program, we have home-based services where a teacher goes out to the home and works with parents on the Parents as Teachers curriculum for 0 to 2-year-olds. They also work with 10 pregnant women through pregnancy services and opportunities. We have 64 students who are in the Early Head Start Center-based program, meaning that the students come to us for 7 hours a day. We have 102 Head Start 3s students and 40 Head Start pre-K students. And so those are the slots that we have available within Clark County School District. The students that are served are selected based on the eligibility requirement, selection, enrollment, and attendance. You as a board voted on the new URSA plan in December each year. That plan reflects what we find in our community assessment as needs for our community. The standards that they follow are the Georgia Early Learning Developmental Standards and the Head Start Early Learning Framework. The budget that we have is personnel heavy because when you're working with students, you're really working with, it's the people. But the total grant award is $3,514,659. Our non-federal share, which is the local portion of that, that between community, state, and local dollars, is just over 500,000. If you, at your leisure, want to look, we have a copy of the notice of award there. Our organizational structure, you are the governing body as the Board of Education. Our superintendent serves as our executive director. I, as the director of Office of Early Learning, serve as his designee. Our coordinator serves as the director for Early Head Start and Head Start. Angie Mendiazela, who's sitting across from me. Our Head Start Policy Council and Parent Committee serve as an advisory council. And then our Head Start, Early Head Start staff work to ensure that the decisions made by the Board of Education are enacted and our students have the best possible learning environments. For our Head Start, Early Head Start, for our metrics, your job, as it were, as a board, as we said, is to ensure that we have fiscal health, that we're using good human resource management practices, and that we're ensuring that our programming, both our academic and our wraparound services, are provided an opportunity for each student. Our program goals, including ensuring that we are fiscally solvent. We were a part of the last state federal grant and there were no findings for us or for Clark County School District in general, but our federal grant in specific as well. Human resources, we have, our goal is to have 100% of our staff hired to hold the certificates, degrees, or credentials required for the position. And then wraparound services, we're looking at our students coming, they're not all coming in with health insurance, a dental home, medical home, immunizations, or their periodic screenings, but we're making sure that when working with the families that before they exit our program, all of these are in place for families. I'm clicking here on the school readiness link. The one piece that I skipped through quickly, safety is also one of our pieces. We ensure that we are 100% compliant with all of our safety regulations and things that are required. Our school readiness goals are tied to the Early Head Start School Readiness link. We ensure that all of our students have, response to emotional cues, that they're taking care of their own needs, that they're using writing and drawing for tools. And so as we work through our school growth plan, we're also looking at school readiness. Are our students entering kindergarten ready to learn? So the advantage to us having Clark County School District, our local educational agency, as our governing board is it ensures that we have high quality early education that's aligned to Clark County's goals, to our mission, our vision, our priorities, our theory of action. It supports the work that we do with Head Start, Early Head Start students. It also provides a need that's documented in each and all of our community assessments, is that as a county, we don't have enough high quality seats for students and for the numbers of children that we have below the age of 5. Disadvantage is we simply don't have enough seats. We don't have enough seats to serve all of the students that qualify for our service, and as a county, we don't have enough seats. And we have limited space. However, given that our district facilities use for project report does include the addition, so that's a piece that we're hoping is coming our direction. Then the question becomes, so what does all of this mean to you? Really, what it comes down to is your role in the fiduciary oversight. If you really have the approval, we always hope you won't deny, but approval or question on any grant submission. So before we submit our grant, it always comes to you all, several hundred pages of it. And I know y'all read it. Cover. Actually, I do know that you do read it because you ask questions. And I appreciate that you really do take the time. You also look at and vote on our amendments, and you'll notice that that's one of the things coming forward to you. Fiduciary oversight is ensuring, as you track back to our metric, to ensure that we continue to have clean audits and that we continue to utilize our funds wisely. And each time you get a policy council report, you see where the funds have gone for that month. Our human resources oversight to ensure that you take care of and manage and maintain our human resources policies and procedures and protocols that we follow. We ensure that we are accountable for making sure that we're hiring staff that meet all of the qualities and criteria. And this one, of course, so it's expecting, is ensuring that it is our responsibility to ensure that our staff are adequately compensated for the work that they do. And that as part of the Head Start, Early Head Start, we do have to do a compensation study to ensure equitable payments. Our department oversight, Dr. Means and myself are responsible, and you can hold us accountable for ensuring that our children continue to make forward progress through the review of our council, our minutes, and also through watching our school growth plan. In our community engagement, we continue to ensure that our community partnerships will serve the needs of our families. I think that's it. Are there any questions or concerns that you might have at this time? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any questions for this report, but for our new board members, this is a very efficiently run organization. If you get a chance to go to the policy council meetings for Head Start, Early Head Start, I see that organization not only serving the needs of the children, but you see right there, what do you call it? There's some growth for parents in terms of their training, in terms of how they run organizations, how they become board members. That was my first exposure to the Clark County School District when I came on board. And I literally have just benefited so greatly from just looking at the strategic and practical, tactical approach that they have to preparing parents to step up and take that leadership role in terms of understanding that organization and how it works. So it is one of the most efficiently run organizations I've ever seen in my entire life. So it's really a good experience, and they feed lunch. So you really want to know.
Well, thank you. And I do say that our policy council is 100. Our parent committee is 100% parents. Our policy council is 51-49 with parents and community members, or community parents who have been parents, or community members who have been parents.
So that's why I'm excited to see that program grow exponentially. I think it has the foundation to launch and do some really great things. So thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a couple questions about the program itself. Who is the funding agency? Is it the Department of Education?
It is actually Health and Human Services.
Oh, okay. And then how often do you have to apply for?
We have a 5-year grant cycle, but we have to reapply every year. We have always had clean audits and clean monitorings. If we were to have a monitoring that was not clean or in which we had significant findings, we would have to recompete. We were able this year to reapply for the beginning of our next 5-year cycle without a competition because we had clean, clear audits and clean, clear monitorings. And I have to brag a little bit, the early childhood, we only missed one off of the advanced ed. And it was that they wanted 4-year-olds to have 22 a room, and the state of Georgia has 22. So that wasn't us.
I have one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this sorry. Is it common, this setup to have the school district as the governing body of early Head Start? Is that?
We are by no means the only one, but I would not say it's common. I can't imagine doing it separate of the part of the school district, just because the purpose and having 0 to 12
Right.
school district is a phenomenal opportunity that I can't imagine you could improve opportunity for that transition. Yes, ma'am.
I had a few questions. Under one of the slides, you listed all of the different programs that
Yes,
are
ma'am.
available. All of those some of those are in-home programs, right? Or all
Yes,
of
ma'am.
them?
The
Okay.
home-based program is within the home. We have 90 students who are served by 10 home educators that go out and visit in the home.
It says. And then,
The pregnancy services are offered in the home as well.
under there was just a sort of a large overview of the budget for.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
It's not my area of strength. So when you, on one of the lines, it said fringe.
Those
What
are,
is that?
that is benefits for teachers. So the teachers'
Okay.
salaries are the personnel. Fringe is their health insurance, the teachers' retirement system, taxes,
yes,
everything
yes.
that has to
Okay,
be paid
okay.
in terms of, the government is giving us the money, but they'd like their part
We
back.
have to pay, yeah, we have to, okay, thank you. And then my last question was, under the goals, and there was a slide on metrics,
Yes,
and I think it mentioned one of those being, having a positive academic impact.
yes. That was on, I believe we'll go up, first one, I believe it's under the fiscal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one.
So-
Yeah.
So it's okay, go forward one. Really, our thought there is that the expenditure or the money that we're spending, that 3 million plus, needs to have a positive impact for our students. And so if our students continue each year to show the kind of growth that we would like to see, then we can say that that money's been wisely spent.
Okay, and so that's measured by things that.
That would really be measured by our school readiness goals.
Okay.
So, Dr. Gant, this is the first year that we've set up, and hopefully veteran board members are starting to see the shift here. But the way we want to operate as a school district is there should be a dashboard for every component of the district to see how we're operating. 1.1 is really a return on investment component. Because then as a board, you have to ask the question, so why are we approving the reapplication of a grant annually if it's not getting the results that we want for the children? And so that's what, that's more of a ROI, return on investment measure. And so we created this dashboard this year, so then you, on a monthly basis, you can ask the question, so how are we doing in all of these areas? I think in the past, it was simply you read the minutes from the policy council, and you had to kind of figure out what was happening from that perspective. So on a monthly basis, and Karen will work with her team. In some cases, it may be a monthly metric. In some cases, it may be a quarterly metric. But you will have a dashboard now where you can say, so how are things going? It kind of ties back into that concept of balanced governance and true board governance through metrics.
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to accomplish.
And we're in charge
Yeah,
of that.
Karen,
Yes,
and you mentioned clean audits, and I'm happy to hear that because I was aware of that, but I think it's important to mention that the people know this. I won't say several years ago, but at least a couple of years ago, there were many early Head Start programs wiped out because money is missing, money had been stolen. And if I recall correctly, the state of Kentucky was leading that list. So I congratulate you all and sort of piggyback on what Linda said. You know, you run a third program. That's important. And that's what Dr. Ming said a few minutes ago. You've got to spend this money for educating children and see the results. I know several years ago, we were tracking these kids that are in the early Head Start, and sure enough, our scores were better than the ones that were not in the early Head Start. So that's important.
We're seeing typically year after year full state-9 growth for our students, and that's, makes a significant difference when a student's entering kindergarten, a leg up.
Madam Chair and board members, I think as you look at it, we want you to dig into these metrics more. There's some points of concern from our perspective. I think if you go to the next page, Ms. Vodka, you'll notice that when we talk about dental examinations for children in early Head Start, the percentage of only about 35% of those children having some type of dental experience is a concern. And then even to get at that threshold of 78% is something that we want to work at. When you look at the programming component of 3.12 and 3.13, Karen and I have had the conversation of some of our families feel that the access of certain services through the community for WIC and SNAP isn't as friendly as it should be. We're seeing that manifest through these data points. So those are some points of concern that we have, and I know Mr. Davis has signed up to continue to be the board rep to the policy council. Those are areas where we will need advocacy from the Board of Education to help our families. It's unfortunate that, and again, please go to that link, but that video that we showed, it was for the 50th anniversary of Head Start and Early Head Start, which started in 1965 with Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty. And so it talks about how there's so many doctors on this board now, but how President Johnson created Early Head Start to combat poverty. That's his purpose. And so we feel that you've heard me say this before, this is a pathway to address some of our poverty issues in the community. We are concerned, if you go back to slide 4, that we and I think this is where the intersection of the property committee as a board committee and early Head Start and Head Start really comes into play. We would love to have more young people at age 3 served through early Head Start and Head Start. Karen does a wonderful job, and you also do a good job as a board in really vetting out the grants that we seek. Due to our community's demographics and our makeup, we are prime candidate for grant awards in that area of Head Start for 3-year-olds. The data and the research shows that when young people are in early Head Start at age 3, their preparedness is greater. So when they get into pre-K and then kindergarten. So, but that all depends on space. You need space somewhere to actually house 3-year-old early Head Start. So I think Dr. Gant asked the question earlier, so help me understand what's happening in these programs. One of the areas that we're really concerned about is obviously that Head Start for 3s, but also we think we could do a better job if we get more grant funds in that early Head Start home base and pregnancy services. If we can catch families on the front end, we can change families. We've been using the terminology as a 2-generational fix. Not only are we helping the parents, but we can also help the young people. And that's where, as we've heard from Dr. Myers and Ms. Suggs, the school-based health clinic piece really will work well with some of the work that we've recommended.
With our wraparound services and ensuring that our kids have the services they need. Thank you so much for the time today, and please don't hesitate if you have further questions.
Thank you.
We just in conclusion, Madam Chair and board members, we invite the board to really dig into this work. And so while we do this annually, and I think the question was placed out there, so is this normal to have this type of model? There are some nonprofits in other communities where they also receive this grant from the feds, and they're able to run early Head Start and Head Start programming. We encourage and want you to weigh in and to say, so how are we making this connection between birth, or even in some cases prenatal, to kindergarten? What are we doing, and how can we be even more effective in that space? I've heard a lot since I've arrived in this community around our issue of poverty. This is how we attack it. This is how we can really be proactive and creative in addressing this work. And Karen does an amazing job around this area, but we believe that this is part of the answer, not the full answer, but it's part of it.
So thank you both. I appreciate that so very much. And of course, again, this is, so Greg, if you really want me to take it, I'll do that. I'll go back at some point. I really feel strongly that this is, again, one of those differentiators for us as a community. One of the things that I wanted to ask about, though, and let me just say thank you and kudos for the dashboard. Am I happy or what? Yay, thank you. Dashboards are so important to us, and they really do bring transparency to what's happening in our school system, and that makes a big difference. It has always been a concern, and I attend this here too, but we have those questions. We know we're not getting 100% of the kids, not anywhere near that. But the standards that we are employing in our system in Clark County, in Early Learning Center, are we able to share those with these private providers and people in the community so that we kind of are singing from the same sheet of music there?
Yes, absolutely. We invite the private providers, and they're part of the E3C and the Early Childhood Commission, to be a part of our trainings at any time. Unfortunately, they're not always able to take advantage of some of the trainings because on the days that we're out having trainings, they actually have a lot more children. And so but we're able to provide some of that training. We're able to share some of our training resource sites. So the decal helps both at both sites.
There might be a volunteer opportunity for somebody in our community to help make sure that we're pushing that into the hands of those people who need that. When people come to us and say, well, how can we help? Let's create a core and let's send them out there. Thank you. Appreciate that.
One other thing, could we stream, maybe stream some of those meetings
That's
so
what I
that they
was
would
just
be
gonna
able
say,
to.
whenever
We
reported
can
them.
work toward
See what
opportunities.
happens
But
when you
yeah,
get down there.
absolutely. I think it's important for us to have the opportunity, and they're all our children, and
Absolutely.
they are all coming to Clark County schools.
That would be
I'm sorry, this is the exciting part of the work, I believe, in terms of what we do. Can you just speak a little bit about the crosswalk that we're trying to do with Dr. Nolan and our elementary curriculum and what we're doing with Head Start, pre-K and pre-K district-wide?
And so we're ensuring that we're working to ensure that we have a smooth transition between pre-K and the Georgia Early Learning Developmental Standards, working into kindergarten and the Georgia Standards of Excellence, and ensuring that we have a crosswalk, but also ensuring we have the opportunity for kindergarten to learn what has been covered in pre-K, but also pre-K has the opportunity to go in and observe and learn what's being expected in kindergarten, and ensuring that that transition is not only smooth, but the resources are smooth, that the expectations for our pre-K students as they enter that classroom, they've seen and had some experiences prior to entering our kindergarten classrooms. And that's where I think kind of the piece you're talking with too, is our teachers, kindergarten teachers and principals tell us they know who went to pre-K.
Okay.
We want them to know who went to pre-K, but we also want to have the opportunity for all kids that enter in kindergarten to enter with experiences and opportunities, and so we can share some of that.
So to be more explicit, we're actually making that bridge more deliberate in regards to the curriculum we're using in pre-K to kindergarten. So right now, what we're using with pre-kindergarten is a different curriculum than what we use in kindergarten, which is actually, it creates more of a challenge for young people, and we're not able to support the professional learning for those teachers as strongly, which then makes it a little more difficult for them, for those pre-kindergarten teachers to say, we're gonna stay in Clark County. In essence, it feels like they're a separate program. We're, with the curriculum the literacy curriculum that the board adopted just last year, there is a crosswalk to actually providing pre-kindergarten services. And as we start looking at our math curriculum, we will also look for some type of crosswalk where the curriculum that we adopt for kindergartners will also be available for pre-kindergarten as well, making that transition seamless. And so now you'll even see, we believe, a more pronounced recognition and a pronounced difference in kids who are in pre-kindergarten versus kids who are not.
That's
Because they will have 1 year under their belt of the type of curriculum. Now, I want to be clear, pre-kindergarten should not be kindergarten. They're still babies, they're still children. And so we're not trying to make pre-kindergarten kindergarten, but we do want to make sure that the kids, they're not having to learn two different curriculums in 2 different years. That there's a
There's an
bridge.
explicit bridge that creates that transition in a smooth and powerful way for kids.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
And in terms of that bridge, do we have a component in our after-school program, especially for the ones who did not have the opportunity to have the pre-kindergarten?
Yeah, we need to become more, I guess the best word I would use, Dr. Mattis, is we need to become more aggressive in that space. And we talked about it a little bit when we presented the future facilities report. There's nothing preventing us from providing that after school care for the younger children. We have to work through how do you collect payment and what does that look like? But there's nothing stopping us from being in that space. And I think we need to explore that a little bit more. And then the other component is, because Mr. Davis made sure we capture it, in June at a working session, there will be a return report on how are we doing with after school programming with our kindergarten through middle school students. So part of that report will be, so what are we doing for our 3-year-olds and our 4-year-olds?
And typically, if this helps with that, in the summer, we typically have, we apply for the summer transition program grant from pre-K, which allows us to serve students who were not able to be served through pre-K, and pre-serve some incoming dual language students that would then have an opportunity to have some experiences and some exposures that will help make them more successful as they enter. And
I promise I will conclude by saying this. I am a former Head Start student. And so, and I think, it's unfortunate you didn't get to hear the video this evening, but there's a woman who was part of the initial class in 1965 who said, I was part of Head Start and I have siblings who were not. I'm a business owner, I'm a college graduate, I'm these things, because I believe I was part of Head Start. And so, again, we talk a lot about poverty and some of the other challenges, which are legitimate challenges that we have in this community. We believe that this is a tool that we have not leveraged enough to combat those challenges that we face academically and socially.
I can't let you guys go without saying, I see Angie over here, and she is I think y'all are twins, kind of, sort of. So she's the finance person. She finds money. She knows how to do that very well. And so Angie was one of the first people I met when I started working, even on a volunteer capacity in Athens, Clark County. I am so impressed with the way she can go find dollars, big dollars, big dollars. So yeah, thank you, Angie. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just say that if you refresh Board Docs, or the next time you log in fresh, I've added the presentation under the superintendent's report.
Oh, thank you.
Right there.
And it has several links that you can follow. If you have questions, don't hesitate. If you'd like to come for a visit at the Early Learning Center, we invite you.
Go when they do Dr. Seuss Day.
Yes.
That is so
We'll
much fun.
schedule you in such a way that we don't accidentally end up with quorum.
Okay. It'll be okay. All right, so thank you very much for that excellent report. Dr. Mason, are you sure that's it for you?
Yes.
Okay, because we love hearing from you, Dr. Mason.
That's the conclusion to the superintendent.
Thank you so much. Moving down the agenda is next the SPLOST report, right? And Jared's not here, so we're back to you, Dr. Mason.
I believe on Board Docs, all the reports have been uploaded.
They have.
And so board members are encouraged to review not only the Early Head Start Policy Committee meeting, but also the SPLOST report, the Athens Community Career Academy report, and the Parent Advisory Board report. In regards to our SPLOST report, we're coming to an end to construction at BHL and Coyle. We believe that the month of January, those construction projects will be completed. We have We still need to close out Oglethorpe. There's still some outstanding punch list items that we need to address, and Mr. Gilbert is working with his team to address those issues. In regards to Hillsman, we've been pleasantly surprised by the progress being made there. It's really coming along quickly, and we're pleased with that work. We're really excited. We invite all of you to the grand opening of the cosmetology lab on Monday at 8:30, I believe the time is. I will, in the name of transparency and honesty, I will tell you that I've been in the lab and there are 2 massage chairs in the lab. And so
Okay,
Mr. Lawrence Harris and I, we talked longer than, I don't know what we even talked about. But we sat in those chairs. They're pretty nice. They're very similar to what you see in a nail shop. Not that I've been in one, Mr. Davis, recently. But it's a really nice lab, to the point that the representatives from Athens Technical College came in and they saw the lab and said, "This is pretty nice. This is very good. This is comparable to what we offer our students." And so kudos to Mr. Gilbert and his team, because that's hard to do. And in fact, if you are curious and if you want to stay afterwards, we can walk you down.
I want my
to see
next
the
meeting
lab.
to be in that lab.
So, but the grand opening is January 7th at 8:30 a.m. We are pleasantly surprised by the continued positive tracking of revenue on a monthly basis. And so that's continuing to be a positive for our SPLOS report as well. Mr. Gilbert, did I miss anything, sir?
Nope. Got one question. I'm kind of going back and forth, and I know these numbers are comparing apples to oranges, so to speak, but I'm looking at the SPLOS 5 budget projections that were at the October 31st SPLOS meeting. And the one column that they have there is the original budget for these different items. And that would be helpful to me if when we do and maybe it doesn't belong there because math is not my forte, but to have those numbers where it says contingent / change order report, does that make sense or not? Or at least have it as part of the SPLOS report, the original amount that was budgeted, what's been spent thus far, and what's left to spend. So I know enough to ask a pretty silly question, but even with that.
May I try to clarify?
Yeah.
I think what you're asking for is you would like to see a tracking
Right.
of what we initially identified as a project cost, what the project is actually costing, and then what is either going into a fund balance as a result of us not spending as much as we initially thought or spending more than we projected. Right?
Right.
Why do I think I've seen it?
Well, it's not part of the SPLOS report. It was part of our question and answer period of the facility report.
And you would like to have a monthly
Right.
tracking of that
Right.
component.
Right.
I understand. So I think what Mr. Davis is saying is initially on the front end with SPLOS 5, we said, here are the projects we're going to do, and this is how much they're going to cost. And as we've built Oglethorpe, for example, or as we've completed BHL and Coil, we had an initial dollar amount. What did it actually cost? And are we either under or over budget for each of those projects?
Right.
I understand.
Well, as far as being over or under budget, if you're gonna have an approved guaranteed max price, it's gonna be what the approved amount that is brought to you guys that you vote on. And then that's what we track as far as being over or under with the change orders and things that happen throughout the project. We can go back to the original SPLOS 5 projections, but again, those are projections. So, if we do scope increase as we did for BHL and Coil, originally we budgeted $10 million a piece. Well, the projects ended up being 14 and 15 million. So based on our programming that we did, actual costs and bids that came in, they're 14 or 15 million. So versus the original 10 that we had earmarked for those two schools.
And I hear you say, Mr. Davis, that's fine. You just want to be able to track it.
Right. And I think what the original number is kind of like what we projected out to the public originally. And it's not that, I mean, we did exactly what we needed to do for the space that we needed and the cost and everything. But I think that if we lose sight of where we started from, the very first numbers that we put out there for Hillsman, for instance, then I get lost in the weeds because I'm looking here at, at the approved guaranteed maximum price or bid, the contract amount, they're the same. So I'm not, I'm just trying, like Dr. Mean says, I'm just trying to track where those SPOS dollars are coming, what we projected originally, and be able, and so we as board members should be able to clearly explain to the public why there was a $3-4 million more than we had initially anticipated, because we built something different.
Right.
And
Well,
so,
you gotta remember that the original SPOS, it's a projection.
right,
Based on
based on the knowledge at the time.
anticipated costs and the scope of what we're gonna do. When all that changes, then obviously your budget's gonna change. So I think there's probably a 2-page document included in the facility report
Right.
that we can just update monthly, and then you'll have.
That would be helpful. That would be very helpful.
What this is a specific accounting month to month for that project in regards to what the contractor's being paid and any, unforeseen conditions or extra expenses that he may incur. That's what the contingency change order report gives you.
Okay.
So this is where we see those changes in this change order report, right?
Right, if we run into rock and we spend an extra $1 million on a project like we did, you'll see that project specific, but you're not gonna see it overall, the total SPOS program for, the 120 million, 111 million we anticipate.
And no doubt, you're gonna have change orders.
Right, and the key is to minimize, and that's why we're hard bidding jobs now and, doing them that way.
Well, what would be the appropriate place to do like Dr. Means was saying, kind of doing an update?
Yeah, I can put the 2-page report in here just as part of it.
Okay.
That way you'll see as it goes, because, you may change projects. In our facility report.
It's a table.
Yeah.
It's a table that identifies the original costs, the change, why there was a change, who was part of those conversations. So for example, if we identified 10 million for BHO and COIL, but after meeting with staff and discussing curricular needs, that it actually went to 13 million at each place, then at least let's identify it. But I think it goes one step further as we're making those changes, either discussing them at the CLC level or seeing it in these reports. I think that table will allow the board members to ask the question, so why did we spend $6 million more on what we initially planned to spend at BHO and COIL? I think, Mr. Davis, I'm going to defer to you. I think that's what you're seeking. I think we can collect that data.
And it's gonna be, when we bring that project to you and we discuss it and for you guys to approve, that would be the appropriate time to have that information to say, well, hey, originally we were gonna do this for X, now we're doing this. What changed or what was the difference?
And we can be more deliberate when we bring items of $80,000 or more to the board to say, FYI, we initially thought it was going to cost 10 million. It's actually going to cost 13 million. Just please note. So then the board can track that. I think these are all reasonable.
I think the problem with the advantage of having seeing the same stuff over and over again is that it really helps me. Like I'm still writing down Karen's numbers for the Head Start program because I feel like I need to see it over and over and over again. So I feel like a lot of times I'll see the SPOS report and I feel like I've just stepped into a middle of a stream without knowing how I got there to begin with. Thank you.
I have some questions that I think are related or relevant to what Greg was saying. So when the SPOS first starts and there's an identification of what projects are going to be done during that funding period, who puts that together? And I know we as taxpayers vote on whether we want to keep SPOS. And I don't remember if seeing on the ballot does it say specifically what the anticipated projects are?
We list all of our facilities.
Okay.
So we'll identify all of our sites, and if we're gonna do a new school, whether it's elementary school or such, as in SPOS 4, we had some new elementary schools to be built.
And that's on the,
That's on the
Ballot.
referendum.
okay, right, so
And
that, okay.
I think everybody previous has gotten all the referendums, and Dee, I don't know if.
We have
y'all-
extra copies.
Right, okay, so we have all the referendums, so you can read that and see, what we try to do is keep that language as general as we can,
Mhm.
so that as needs change in a 5-year period, you can adjust and turn and move and say, okay, hey, we need to do an addition here, or we need to do,
Dr. Benjamin, I think what you're raising is really an interesting question, which we discussed at a community oversight committee meeting, I believe in November, which is the policy of this district, the school district, from an East Bluffs perspective has been, let's just cast a really wide net. And if the voters say, yes, we agree to SPLOST, then you can pick your projects. There's another model where you are very specific about, here are the things that we need to fix. Here are the items. Here's what we're asking for. It's very similar to what the ACC government does in terms of identifying the projects, having a projected cost, and then going to the voters that way. And so I think from a policy and vision standpoint, the board should have that conversation in terms of how you want to proceed. Do you want to be more specific about what you request in SPLOST 6 in terms of specific projects, or do you want to cast a wide net the way that you've been doing it in the past? We'll make sure that Ms. Vodika sends you all the different ballots. One of the questions from our community oversight committee was, well, we can't remember what was on the third ballot, SPLOST 3 ballot. And so we actually, we worked with Unified County Government to get all of those ballots. So we'll get those to you so you can see. I don't think it gives you much insight because it's so broad. Then it really comes down to, and I think that's why in the past, the Community Oversight Committee has been this very unique committee where a lot of discussions were happening that sometimes don't happen at this level. What happens at the board level is just simply, here's what we're requesting of you to approve or deny, where some of the logic behind, here's the projects we selected and why we selected them, that sometimes that discussion doesn't happen here. So I think you're raising a good conversation, and I think it's one of those, now I'll make note of it, I think it's a working session conversation that the board should have in terms of what direction you want SPLOST to move in the future.
And would that be pretty much under the auspices of the property committee as well?
It can be.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Well, I think on an annual basis, we one of our metrics in the strategic plan scorecard is to have an annual review of all of our facilities. And so from a strategic plan standpoint, what should drive SPLOST 6 are those annual review of our properties. And if we see something popping up on a property, so for example, you'll see on the strategic plan scorecard, we want to eliminate the trailers. We don't believe that schools should have trailers from a security standpoint, if nothing else. And so how are we making that happen? Are we tracking and reducing those trailers on an annual basis? So everything, we're trying to draw everything back to our strategic plan scorecard to see if we're actually addressing those things or not, even under SPLOST.
Thank you. Are we good with SPLOST? You can talk, it's okay. All right, so next on the agenda. We'll vote on the SPLOST report next in our meeting. Is that going to be, or is this information we don't have to worry about? Athens Community Career Academy report, that also was in our packet, was it not?
They did not have a updated report after your last meeting.
Okay. Dr. Means, did you have anything to add to that, or we're going to keep moving? Awesome. Board members, do you have any concerns or questions about the Career Academy report? All right, life is good. We don't have one. Parent advisory board, is that going to be something we see next week? So do we need one, or where are we on this?
The Athens Career Academy.
Right.
They will not have, they
They have
did not meet since your last meeting, so they don't have any new report.
They've been very active in the Educate Athens piece of Envision Athens, but yeah, I don't think we should make them report out on that. But thank you so much. Parent Advisory Board report, was there any questions or concerns about the PAB? Yes.
Well, one thing I was really impressed to read that in the February meeting, the PAB has asked to I guess gain information, discuss the what they called, according to their notes, understaffing at schools, especially parapros, custodians, and bus drivers. And that's an issue that I have too. And so I'm so glad that they're picking it up. And I've just wondered if at some point, Dr. Means, is that something that we can talk about as a board? Because that is a concern of mine. And I think that what I've been looking at is in terms of parapros and in deference to Avita, that's an issue that she's raised repeatedly for years about their low pay. So, I know we have many things on our plate, but I just feel like whatever presentation PAB gets in February, that maybe we can get a piece of it.
Dr. Means, you're good?
Sure.
All right. I'm gonna make that your action item. And that takes us through our information items. Next on the agenda, we have I'm sorry, did anybody else have any questions or concerns about the PAB report? I actually enjoy getting their reports. It's so much better than going to the meetings for the last 30 minutes. So, thank you. I appreciate this. Okay. Then minutes of the previous meetings, yes. The regular meeting, December 13th. Any questions or concerns about those minutes? Yes.
One question I've got is that I think it's so hard for to expect. In this case, it was Dr. Means, and maybe I missed it, but to expect him to look back at these minutes. But I know at one point we were talking about the computer network class at that December 13th board member meeting. I mean, that December 13th board meeting. And I know that you were talking about getting more information from Mr. Harris about why about the computer classes and the low enrollment, because they were cut. And so I would still like to renew that because I didn't remember that until I went through the minutes.
So you're still looking for a report from Mr. Harris about why the computer classes were?
Yeah, I'm just kind of like I wasn't sure what was being taught in those classes. If the information is like just out of date, or kids are no longer interested and they've gone from computer to iPhone. I didn't know. It seemed weird to me that we were dropping a computer network class. So I just wanted like an explanation as to why Mr. Harris thinks we have low enrollment.
I sent that information.
You did send it to me?
I sent it to Mr. Harris on December 20th.
Okay.
And I think just in the break time,
Okay.
it's forthcoming.
Okay.
We haven't forgotten.
Okay. Sorry about that.
I appreciate the follow-up. All good.
And next on our agenda is okay, so with that, we don't vote on these minutes until next week, right?
That's
So
accurate.
these are all the questions, no clarifications, thank you. Moving down to agenda item E, we're at policies, regulations, exhibits to be posted for public comment for 4 weeks. And we'll go one by one. Policy GAEB, harassment is out for review. Any concerns or questions about policy GAEB? And Dawn, would you like to walk us through these, or am I doing okay? You're doing great.
I'll answer any questions.
Yeah, any questions? Well, yeah, we can take them back. Or what about employee harassment investigation, the checklist, that was a review? Actually, we had a really good policy council meeting for the things we got through. We got through a lot of these very easily, and then the ones that were difficult, we saved them for you guys. How about that? All right, policy GAEB number 3, and that's the employee harassment complaint investigation report again for review. Regulation GAEB harassment, that was a review, no changes there. Policy GAF, that was a revision. Staff-student relations, we had a lot of discussion on that one. And I think we came to some really clear consensus, at least in the committee, about who we were talking about and who this policy specifically addresses, and it does address staff. And staff would be anybody that's employed by the district. Any questions about staff-student relations?
And I think we got some clarification on about, how interns fit into that too. That was my question,
Are you satisfied that we
Yeah,
handled it in this document?
I think so. I'm trying to think back on the discussions. I mean,
I don't remember that one leaving. We didn't have anything outstanding from that particular
yeah, I
discussion.
didn't think.
And then the drug-free workplace, we thought that was very well done. A couple of wordsmithing things there, but that went well. Any concerns about drug-free workplace? The rule is to have one, yeah, like that. And policy, you know what we didn't talk about is those vapor things. Did we talk about that? What we covered? The electronic stuff that they're doing now. We talked about that, didn't we? That was so surprising. Okay. And then policy BD, professional personnel hiring. Questions, concerns? Let's get a chance to look at that one. GBKA, professional personnel layoffs.
Yes, I've read that one over and over and over. Now, let me finish Cornelius. I will address this next Thursday.
We have some questions for staff. Let's get those to them prior to, so that they'll have plenty of time to do the research on that. Regulation GBKA, professional personnel layoff. That might help spur that thought, Mr. Worthy. Policy GBI, professional publishing. Is that a GBI or a T? That's a T. That's a T. I need to do these glasses. Any questions or concerns about policy GBT? Policy JAA, equal educational opportunity. That was very specific. Did we have any questions or concerns about that one? Exhibit JAA, that's the student harassment investigation checklist. Policy JAAE2, student harassment complaint form. Most of these are mandated. So also exhibit JAAE3, student harassment complaint investigation report. And finally, JAA Reg 1, equal education opportunities. Concerns, questions? That was a very good policy committee meeting. We did such a good job. Thank you. I'm gonna miss you guys. That's right. I won't be there anymore. Oh, well. Policies to adopt. We have nothing to rescind. We've already covered the superintendent's report. We are now down to the consent agenda items. Discussion.
Yes, thank you.
I wrote it down. So the first one would be to approve the field trips.
Madam Chair, there's 3 field trips being recommended. One for Clark Central and Clark Middle School to go to the Festival of Music in Washington, D.C., April 5th through the 7th of 2019. The second is Fowler Drive to go to Jekyll Island, on May 1st through the 3rd. And finally, a very traditional middle school trip to Washington, D.C., for Coyle Middle School, May 12th through the 15th.
There is no provision for board members to become escorts on these trips. I've already checked that out. So we're on our own in terms of trying to get there.
Well, I'm just really excited about the DC trip for Coral, and I'm just and that was a life changer for me. And I'm just trying to do we have an idea of like the numbers? Because I know it's not cheap, and I know they're doing fundraising, and I hope they hit me up. But
Don't wait, just
In
go volunteer right
the
there.
report, it stated that the vehicle cost is $1,375. This price already includes a $250 grant provided to our students by Close Up. because they're Title I school.
They're already doing some fundraising, I know, and I would just really, I don't want to minimize the other field trips either, but I really, I mean, orchestras tend to have more of a basic support than traditionally than just a school, you know. So anyway, I would like to see as many students participate in these field trips as possible. Really great.
Head Start, early Head Start, governing body report.
Madam Chair,
Yes, oh, I'm sorry, this
are
is
we
still on
going to put this
consent.
on consent?
Excuse me. Consent, that's what I usually do. So
Okay.
I'm talking now, so someone else has to step up and say consent. Okay, so
Consent.
field trip is consent, thank you. Number
Okay.
2, Head Start, early Head Start governing body required annual orientation presentation, consent,
Consent.
Yeah.
great. Approve intent to apply for pre-kindergarten annual grant. Concerns or consent?
Absolutely consent.
Consent.
Thank you. Number 4, approve Head Start, early Head Start, intent to submit 2018-19 grant amendment.
Yes.
Consent.
Consent, approve resolution on legal services.
Madam Chair, board members, this is a unique agenda item.
Yes. it is.
Per the district's charter, right now, we are obligated to put out to bid on an annual basis legal services. That's a unique clause in the school district's charter. What we are requesting is to go through the process for the Georgia State Legislature to allow us to modify the district's charter to allow this Board of Education to engage in a longer term relationship with a legal service firm. Does not, and I want to be very clear, it does not mean that we are locking in with Hall Booth Smith at all. What it does, and that's why you can see in the timeline, it allows us to go out to bid to engage with legal firms that this board and administration can vet to see if we want to engage in a long-term relationship. We're seeing the negative to an annual bidding of legal services is that it sends a message to other legal firms, not only in the local area, but also statewide, that this is not the type of school district that you want to even bid your services. You don't want to submit an RFP response to, because you have to go through this on an annual basis. The other component is we believe that it is inhibiting legal counsel to provide the type of direction that they need to provide to not only staff, but also the board in certain cases.
So what you're saying, Dr. means that we shouldn't be, what you're proposing here, that it would be not a year-to-year contract.
No, sir.
Okay. That's what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So is there a particular length in mind?
I think that's something the board will have to give us direction on.
What is the typical length? You said this was unique, so for other school districts, what's the typical length?
I've had anywhere between a 5-year relationship to perpetuity until the board says this doesn't work for us anymore. I've seen a 5-year runway. I've seen until, and it happens in certain cases. So in certain cases, you may have lead counsel that eventually retires. This board has had that situation happen where you had a long-time attorney who then said, I'm retiring. And so at that point, the board may say, okay, our person's retiring, it's time for us to go out and just test the waters to see what's available.
When you say perpetuity, do you mean that it's at any time, or is it actually?
At any time.
Oh, okay.
Now, in conjunction
At any
with-
time. I'm sorry, I didn't want to give the impression that means you're locked in forever.
Yeah.
It means until the board says, we think it's time for a change.
Now, in conjunction with what Dr. Knox said a few minutes ago, how long, and you were saying like, well, you did it up to 5 years. I don't think that in the state of Georgia, they're gonna allow you to do that. And the reason for that, with the superintendent, you don't go beyond 3 years. And there are some high school principals that actually ask for more than just a year-to-year contract. I did, but they turned it down. But anyway, I don't think it can go beyond 3. I do agree with what you're saying.
I think if this board decides that you want a 3-year runway, I think that would be very healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer this not to be consent. I need some more time.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay, then,
But I've got some questions about it.
other questions, go ahead.
Yeah, I asked the same thing as, I mean, that's what I talked to Dr. Means earlier. One thing that I do think that we need to clarify, and because I'm trying to keep this in my head, is that this board sees the services of our legal services only in one perspective, and that is their involvement with the board. You know, now there's a lot of legal services provided by council for special education, and I mean, and I would say probably the bulk of the work is involved with that, and so that's I'm not I know nothing about that work, and so I'm not expressing any concerns about that work because I have no reason to even question the work of legal counsel for anything that's not dealing directly with the board. My questions in terms of legal counsel and their involvement with the board, in terms of us specifically, is I did go to a GSBA workshop years ago that was held downtown Athens, and this subject came up, and a lot of the school districts actually contracted individual services and not just the whole blanket thing. And so, and I'm saying that not to say it's better or worse than what we've been doing. But it is a different. I was surprised because I thought contracting legal services across the board was pretty standard until I went to that meeting. But that being said, you know, I do want a little clarification in terms of, and I know if Carol were here, she would raise this question, is that, you know, and I don't know if she ever got an answer to it, maybe she did, and I just need to talk to her more, but, you know, who does the attorney represent? Yeah, does it represent the school district? So it's automatically the board, so everybody knows that but me.
We've had this conversation.
Yeah, I know we have,
And so the attorney represents the district.
But you gotta be specific about what you said when you say the district. Because sometimes people get the idea that, okay, the attorney is representing teachers. Not so. That's not true.
All right, Dr. Means has an answer for
So I
us.
appreciate the question, Mr. Davis.
That's not what I.
It's a fascinating question. You can construct whatever you want as a board. There's some models where the board says we want our own attorney.
Right.
And then staff has their own attorney.
And they do.
And you can construct a system that way. And this is a very traditional model where there has been trust between the board and administration, where you can share the same attorney, and there's a universal trust that legal counsel is providing the right direction to not only the board, but also staff. If that's not where this board wants to function, and that's okay. So you can look at, and I think I've shared this before with the board, you look at larger school systems, the board has its own legal counsel, and then staff has its own legal counsel. And that it actually is beneficial in the case of employee hearings for dismissal or disciplinary hearings for students and expulsion. That's actually, and I've shared this with our team before, I'm used to that model of the board having its own attorney and the staff having a separate attorney. Because then what happens is that attorney for the board goes into executive session with the board during your deliberations for either an expulsion.
So he will, in that situation, representing, that's the board.
Represents the board and represents the board's perspective. Right now, what you do is that the board goes into deliberations by yourself.
Or
and
with him.
Or with counsel.
With counsel.
And so then it's an awkward space, right? Because legal counsel was sitting with staff as they were presenting the case for expulsion or termination. Then same legal counsel is going into deliberations with the board. It really comes down to the relationship and the trust factor between legal counsel, the board, and staff.
Dr. Means, what you said a few minutes ago now with the legal counsel for the board, and it's customary in the state of Georgia, like you say, staff have their own. Example, teachers, even staff members here. That's why they join GAE. That's why they join PAGE. Because if they get into any type of legal situation there, those attorneys going to represent them, not the board's attorney.
And what I was referencing when I said staff, I meant administrative staff.
Okay.
So in other words, if Heidi Hill, who's our executive director of special education, has an issue, then there's a school administration lawyer. Again, I guess the best example I can come up with is if there's an expulsion hearing. Right now, what happens is that legal counsel, Mike Pruitt, sits with our administrative staff in presenting the case for expulsion, then walks into the deliberation room with the board as you're deciding if you should expel the student and for how long. And I think for some board members that sends a mixed message. What I'm sharing with you is that you can construct it however you want. I'm used to the model where there's a pivot and the district's attorney ultimately, when it's all said and done, if they have to pick a side between functioning with administrative staff or the board, they always pick the board. And so then in those cases, let's just talk that through, right? So if we have an expulsion hearing, Mike Pruitt will say, I'm sorry, Dr. Myers, I'm sorry, high school administrator, I am no longer your attorney now. My function is to support the Board of Education. What happens in those cases is then we have an alternative legal firm that simply represents and sits with administration when those presentations are presented to the board. There's a delineation and a division in the sand, if you will, in terms of who represents what. Then it makes it very clear, Mr. Davis, in terms of who does the board attorney work for. It's the board. But you get to decide that. The point of all, I think we're getting deeper in the weeds. You can't even have this conversation until you decide if you want to have a relationship of more than 1 year. And what we're presenting to you as a challenge is that we believe when you have a legal services relationship that's year to year, it does inhibit the ability for you to get strong legal counsel. If you want to set that time limit to be 3 years, that's great. That's your decision. And that's fine. But what we are suggesting to you is that right now we're facing a challenge in having a year-to-year model.
Let me just say,
I'm sorry.
I mean, the reason I can't support this right now, and that's why I wanted to discuss it first, because I've got questions in terms of how the attorney is being utilized, again, by the board for the board issues, on board issues.
So let me take this one back, because we've done this one before. And I think it's great to do this conversation again with all of our new board members. There was, I thought, a document that was produced. If not a document, there was a presentation from Mike where we got a breakdown of how much time and money was spent with the special needs things and the court hearings, and we just kind of got a summary review of all of that. So maybe that's a good starting point for us. But the only question this is asking us is, and it won't change any of that, do we want to go to our legislators and see if we can extend the contract term for legal services to more than 1 year?
So Mr. Davis, to answer your question, if the board ultimately wants to have its own legal counsel, if you don't want Hall Booth Smith, that's fine. You can construct your own system where you have your own attorney that provides your own counsel. But what we're suggesting to you is that if you're going to hire that counsel on a year-to-year basis, it's going to be difficult to get strong legal counsel.
The thing is, I'm not even at that point right now. I'm just trying to understand what our relationship is now, the legal counsel, because it's almost like, being engaged to someone and saying, well, let's go ahead and take the plunge. We're not sure we're going to be able to make it through the engagement, but, to go ahead and sign up for a 3-year contract. I what I want to know, for instance, Linda, if you will please bear with me. When the board asks for an opinion from the attorney on the topic, which we have, we will get a letter, typically in email version of it, and there's no opportunity for us as board members, in my opinion, to actually question what is being written. I mean, I do appreciate the ruling, but it's not like, I mean, I'm gonna confess something. When I first got on the board, I would call up Mike Pruitt and say, I got this question. You know, you said so-and-so, what does this mean? I was able to get away with that, and because I never asked for permission to do that. Now I know that that's not proper. So now I don't have a vehicle to actually call up and say, this is what you said in a letter to the board. I don't understand where you're coming from. I don't understand the basis of that.
Great.
You know,
I think this, so as a board of education, you have to decide what type of legal counsel you want. And there are certain models where a board of education has its own legal counsel. And the board then can pick up the phone. Any of the members can pick up the phone anytime and get a ruling or get clarification on any law that you want. Please note, what happens then is that the Board of Education has to have a line item in the budget then for legal services. Because now you have your own legal services. But you can construct that model if you want it.
I don't know.
The board has to construct that.
I don't know what we have now, much less what.
So the model you have right now is that we share legal counsel. We share legal counsel. So legal counsel not only serves the needs of administrative staff as legal issues come up, it also serves the Board of Education when the board needs to be represented. It's a shared model. That's why when you hear the terminology, the legal counsel represents the district, it's not only the board, it's also administrative staff. That's the model we have right now.
And Mike gave us a very explicit delineation for if it came down between us and the district, then the board has to go get its own attorney because he is hired by the district according to their contract. And
That's not true.
Am I wrong on that?
He is hired by the board.
He's hired by
That's
the
why we
board.
raise our
for the
hand.
district, right?
I was going to say, what I'm typically used to is that when legal counsel has to make a decision in terms of who they're going to represent, they should always side with the board. And they should always side with the board. So I'll go back to that expulsion example. If the board is saying, no, we want legal counsel going into these meetings, then that means Mike Pruitt is representing the board. And then it would be incumbent on us to go out and get another attorney.
So let's pull that contract and we can do that, right? And make sure that everybody gets a look at that contract so that everybody can be on the same page. And then we can have that discussion. That still doesn't change this line item it doesn't have to be consent agenda because we already said it's not going to be consent agenda, but it'll be on the board on the next week to vote to see if we want to change the length of the contract. That's all we're talking about. It's changing the length of the contract.
It's not actually, this agenda item is simply asking for permission to go to the legislature to have them act on changing the charter to allow the district to pursue a multi-year contract.
I took a shortcut I should not have. Darn that Google. Okay, yes.
So as I understand it, the actual action that would be taken in the legislature is to delete subsection D. Is that correct?
That's accurate.
Okay, and that refers to professional services. So that action, we're talking about in terms of legal, but that professional services is a bigger phrase than just legal.
That's the only professional service that we have that would fall into that category for the school district.
Okay, there's nothing else?
Nothing else.
I'm not aware of anything else that would fall under that category.
Okay. So we're clear now on what this request is. And again, it shows that we have more work to do, and we always have work to do in terms of understanding who we are and what our role is and who does what. So those are very good questions. I'm not complaining at all. And I'm not saying it's not important to have the conversation, but I'm just simply saying that doesn't change whether or not we want to go to the legislature to do the work to extend the.
And I guess all I would just add is that if the board pivots to a place where you want your own legal counsel, that's not an unusual model. But then this is even, I believe, more incumbent on you to have the ability to engage a legal firm where you can have a multi-year relationship. Because if you wanted to have your own legal counsel, it will become very difficult for you to find someone that's going to commit to a year-to-year model.
And you're gonna have, if you have your own, it's gonna be very expensive. I know when I was a high school principal, the superintendent exclusively said, look, you call me first, and I can go, you call Tara Bendy, puts the clock on you.
And I think that's a conversation with the board. The board may say, I've seen boards operate in multiple ways, Mr. Worthy. I've seen some, I mean, and I think it's evident tonight, there, you have community members who are really dealing with some very serious stuff, legal things, who may say, I want an unfiltered piece of counsel that isn't, and I'm just trying to pull this from other comments that have been shared with me since I've been in the district. We as the board want counsel that is not colored by administration, but is just strictly something that is going to be beneficial to the board. If that's where this Board of Education rests right now, then you may want to have your own legal counsel. But that's a decision that you need to make among yourselves.
That's truly not this discussion. So I'm
Not
gonna take us
really.
back to our agenda and ask if we can table this, right? And have it some other time, because it's really not what this is about.
No,
And
no,
so,
ma'am.
and we spent a lot of time on it. So I think it's good conversation, good discussion. But we pulled it from consent, and if there's information that you need prior to making this vote next week, let's get that back into Dr. Mead's hands so that he can do that further research.
Okay.
Can we close that and move to number 6, approve the school resource officers annual agreement?
That's definitely concerned for me.
Consent, yeah, discussion?
Yeah, I have a discussion. I think it's a very fair contract that the one thing that I did not see in the contract, and it may not even belong there, but I just want to make sure it's covered, is of these 6 officers that who work for the Clark County Police Department and who are contracted to work with the school district for 174 days, what their training is. I know that the selection process is very specific in terms of it's the police department itself and the school district making that selection. Back in May of 2016, this board paid for me to go to the National School Board Association meeting, and I went to a workshop on the role of school resource officers in public schools, and it was a presentation by the National Association of School Resource Officers, who actually do a specialized training for police officers who are brought into the schools as resource officers. And I would just like to, since this is my opportunity to kind of bring that forward, because I brought it forward to the board back in 2016, but like a lot of things, you just can't do everything, and so it ended up being dropped. But I wanted to know, as we approve this, is there some type of understanding about what type of training these 6 police officers would have?
Chief Sizemore.
Yes, sir.
Chief Sizemore is our chief of police for the Clark County School District and formerly worked with the Athens Clark County Police Department. Chief, what is the training for SROs?
In my last assignment, I was actually responsible for the SROs in Athens, Clark County, or when I was over community outreach. And each one of them, when they're go through the selection process, which is collaborative between the school district and the police department, as soon as possible, and they only teach it once a year, but they go to the SRO training program in the summertime, taught down at the Georgia Police Academy.
Can I ask you have you heard of the National Association of School Board, of National Association of School Resource Officers?
Yes, I
Okay, and I know that at least in 2016, they were doing training in the state of Georgia. And so I didn't know if we've ever looked at them, because I was very impressed with their training. And I didn't know if do we follow that model? Is our model better? I'm
not sure I can adequately answer that question. I do believe that, down at the Georgia Police Academy, that's the type of training that they would have, related to relationships with kids, related to, all the laws that pertain particularly to schools, searches and seizures and things of that nature. I think that training would be very similar, but I don't know.
I would just like if Dr. Means would be willing to just, if the staff would be willing to look at the training of this school resource officers, because they have their own organization. And so, anyway, I just kind of bring that forward and yeah. So there is one June 3rd through 5th in Peach City, Georgia. So how many days of the training for our SROs?
I believe that's 40 hours.
40 hours.
A 1 week course.
Anyway, I just throw that out there as.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, in addition, often they attend the Safety in Our Schools conference. It's held annually down in Columbus, which is a 3-day conference to update on new training.
In answer to your question, Linda, because I know what you're gonna say, what does that have to do with moving this resolution
not at
forward?
all. I'm gonna ask if we can have a presentation on
Great.
school safety.
Great.
Wouldn't that be perfect? And then we can get all of these questions answered, and then if you got other questions, we can feed them into this. And now the question becomes, does this stay on consent agenda? Because we don't have an alternative or what?
Okay, what I would like to do is,
Yeah. Go ahead, finish.
Okay, but earlier I had said consent, and then when Greg mentioned 174 days, we hit a nerve because I said, oh, I read something different. And I'm seeing 176 days said, but I'm wondering about that. I'm thinking that this was changed when we went through that economic crunch because of the furlough days. School years 180 days.
Right, but there's PL days and other things that are taken into account. So when the students aren't at the school,
So
we
they
don't
take
have,
them
we don't
out.
have resource officers there.
Okay.
Right, and the 325 also covers extra time, going to sporting events, PTO meetings, things like that. They need a resource officer there. So there's additional things than just 6 bodies at 176 days or 174 days.
You just answered it. I'm back to consent.
And I guess the only thing is that we have to get this back to Athens Clarke County to the mayor and their board for them to vote on. The training, we can definitely look into. It's just moving the ball forward so we can get it on their docket and their ticket so they can get their folks lined up.
okay, what about next week? I just asked the question again in terms of specifically what kind of training they have and how does it compare to the.
How does that? The question that I would have with that, and
Because I'm looking for an addendum, possibly.
that gives you a list of the training? and-
No, a list of what, an addendum to the contract in terms of the training. I don't know who
So
that,
you want them to take this training from this other
no,
organization?
I want them, I would like clarification in terms of.
There is an addendum to this contract that talks about specific training and things that they do in between Athens Clarke County and our folks. So there is a part in here that talks about what they're supposed to do in the training portion. We can get to that.
Okay, well, that may answer the question.
All right, so you want to pull it from consent, or what are we
Yes.
doing?
No, it doesn't need to be on consent.
We're pulling this from
Yeah.
consent.
So what's the request?
Apparently,
The addendum that he just described. John, you got the addendum?
Yeah.
All right, it's an addendum that gives
We'll
more
give it to you right
specifics.
away.
and you give, yeah, and it's, presumably
Excellent.
that has
Number-
about training, yeah.
We get number 7, approved fuel contract to the Boswell Oil. I actually didn't read this one. Boswell Oil Company.
Why not?
I just didn't.
I don't know why we need to discuss that. You gotta have people.
Consent. Any concerns about the Boswell Oil Company? We're good? All right, consent then. Number 8, approve Lindsay, Pope, Breyer, and Clifford as architectural firm on retainer.
I
Question.
had some questions about it. It looks like there was one firm that really came to the top on this, and I was just kind of interested in in how that firm went so far above and beyond.
They've done the last 3 job for us. They've done over for VHL and Coil, and also Hilton the last 4 jobs. So when you're looking at services they provide, cost of services, continuity of services, the fact that they understand kind of the prerequisites for the district and everything, that's why they're going to score. They scored so much higher. So it's kind of like, you find a good babysitter or painter or whatever, you want to kind of stay with that babysitter or painter if you can.
So I would just modify that and say it a little differently in stating that we have found that the preferred and recommended firm has the ability to flex and to meet the different construction needs of the school communities as we engage them. So as you look at the Hillsman project compared to the Oglethorpe project, they're very different. Where in most other architectural firms, when working with school systems, there is a very cookie cutter approach to this. All the schools look the same,
Right.
And so we have found that this architectural firm has the ability to be flexible. They also understand our cost parameters, and they stay within it as closely as possible. So yes, they're familiar. We're familiar with them, but I think being familiar with them is just the lowest of the objectives. The main objective is that they have demonstrated flexibility and also have stayed within price points that we have identified.
And just another question, just to be clear, this is approving that they will do future projects, but they're not on a salaried retainer, or are they?
No, they'll do future projects. They gave us a cost breakdown to say if the price of the construction is X, here's our fee, here's our charge, that type of thing. So yeah, we've got a list of fees, any future stuff that comes up that we need to retain an architect or have architectural services, we can go right to them versus putting it out to bid, taking 30 days. And again, you run the risk of when you keep going for all these multiple proposals, the architects get kind of burned out because you're not selecting me, your competition gets less. I mean, it's, so yeah, so it's not a specific project, it's for anything future that comes up.
You know what concerns me with this is, we obviously are shutting out a whole bunch of other people in, and we do this consistently. We go with the construction firm and we go with them for the next 3 schools and the next 6 schools, and so nobody else need to apply. And so I'm not sure how we're spreading the wealth and creating any kind of diversity, even in terms of our thoughts and ideas and bringing people in. The other thing about this particular proposal is, again, if we do go with them, I want something. Again, I think I've asked before, do we get internships? Are they working with our career academy to bring, to help us grow this whole concept of internships among our kids? And what are they giving us? Because this is a huge contract for them. If they've already done 3 of our schools, I don't know that we've gotten anything from any of the people that we've asked for, and I don't know if we can make that a part of it. But I want them to walk down the street with us. I want them to partner with us in what we're trying to do in this district in terms of affecting changes for our kids. And so there are some programs I'd like to see them supporting in our school system. There's no reason that they couldn't do it.
I think there was a question earlier, and I think this conversation just spurred a thought for me. There was a question earlier of what other professional services do we have that would fit the classification of a multi-year agreement. This could potentially be one of them. This is a professional service. If we get into a retainer model with architectural firm, this could be another example. Right now, as Mr. Gilbert is identifying, we identify an architectural firm project by project. So it's a little different than what we do with legal services, where it's a year-to-year model. So I think I answered earlier. I wasn't aware of any. As we talk this through, this could potentially fall into that category.
It could not. Well, we probably got that with some of our other contractors too, then, because the other piece of that would be how much, how many projects have they already done for us? And what's the dollar amount of that project? If they already a part of our history of construction and work, what's the value to them? Because again, I'm looking for them to give back.
So I
I think your commitment to give them millions and millions of dollars, I'm looking for something back from them.
But you can't request that.
You can't, yeah, that's,
You can't do that.
yeah, you can't say, well, hey, if you hire me, I want you to hire my nephew on this job to do whatever, we can't do that.
I'm talking
Out
about
of
in
fairness,
terms
I don't think Ms. Davis was
instruction. I'm talking
suggesting.
about in terms of the career academy, career paths. I mean, is there some volunteer stuff we can get? What are they giving them?
I think it's I understand. I don't think you were asking for preferences in terms of employment. On the flip side, I think it's a slippery slope in saying, so what are the perks that you will provide the district as well? I think ultimately we would have to construct an RFP in a way to say what we would have to ask that on the front end, Ms. Davis, if that's something we want to do. I want to bring this full circle to say that the reason why this is being presented to you is because from our SPLOST department perspective, convenience. Instead of going through the RFP process for each project and having different architectural firms submit an RFP response, it allows that project to accelerate and move faster. That's the reason why it's being presented. If as a board, you decide that you would prefer to see an RFP process for each project, and to be very specific about it, then that's good feedback. And so then maybe maybe you're telling us through your preference that maybe we need to reconsider what we're presenting to you. So I guess we need more direction from you. Are you suggesting that the identified convenience that we are trying to seek for the SPLOST department may not be prudent?
Dr. Means, I need to speak. I'm sitting here just cringing. And I understand spreading the wealth. When you spread the wealth, you're going to invite problems. Let me give you some examples. Because I was a principal at the time, but I was involved in all of this. CCSD High School. Oh my God. Oh my. Change orders. I can't tell you how, rather than sticking with the same architect, et cetera, whatnot, change orders. It's got to be in the millions, okay? And then the same thing with some contractors. They give you a song and a dance, but they won't give you quality work. I'm trying to see whether it happened at Clark Central. I believe it was, and I won't call the name of the contractor. Bricks falling away from the wall. You have to be very careful when you look at that. When I look at these things, of course, when I vote on them, I look at it and said, okay, sometimes people say the lowest bid. I look at the lowest bid, and I also look at the best bid. Because when I see a reputable architect, when I see a reputable contractor, and it's only $500 different, I'm going with the reputable contractor. You have to be very careful.
Where is this contractor from? Like where is it
The
located?
architect, they're based out of Lawrenceville.
They have a track record too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really do.
And I don't dispute that. I think they also work with the University of Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. I looked them up before, and they had a bunch of contracts over there too. So it started to look like this is like all in the family kind of thing, And so I'm just asking the question: do we want to continue down that pathway, or do we want to?
It's lost, I think 2 and 3, there was the architectural firm was hired on an extended period of time. And it's, but you can kind of go project to project. If you're not happy, you can, sever that relationship and pick somebody else.
Right.
It's, there's something to be said for an architect that learns your non-negotiables,
Right.
and it minimizes errors in the drawings and things like that. So there's a value to that. Now, as far as giving us something back, they've done a lot of things. Dr. Means has come to me and said, hey, I need this, I need that. Well, and they produced it, and I haven't got it built. So there's things that they've done for us that, the pretty renderings and the concept sketches and things like that you don't get a bill for that they have done for us. So I just think it's.
I'm not assuming that they don't do those things at
Right.
all. But again, I'm just. We're trying to do community schools. We're trying to do things locally. We're trying to do some other stuff, and I'm just trying to see how does this fit into our plans around that construction. So
Yeah, it
that's all
concerns
I
me.
had to say. I'm done.
It concerns me. I'm on the same page as you are. I would like to have more discussion around, we have work-based programs, and I believe there should be some kind of way where we could tie those things in together. We work with businesses all the time. That's one thing Dr. Means has been doing, working with businesses, getting businesses involved and asking for help. So I don't see that as being different when people are getting multi-million-dollar contracts in this poverty-stricken community. And so I would like to see that we have people that we're investing millions of dollars into. Yeah, they're doing great jobs, but I would like to see them invest in our children as well.
And that may be a good point, and Dr. Means may check this out, and that may happen. And if it's checked out legally, I would support it. But if it's not, it's gonna check out legally, I am not gonna support it because when you.
Always speaking
It's
legally.
always gotta be on the legal side. Nobody's
That's
asking
what
anybody
I'm, but
to
see,
do
when
that.
you start putting in an RFP in terms of what you're gonna give back to the school district, what you think those other, competitors are out there going to say? You end up in a lawsuit, I guarantee you.
Well, we don't wanna end up in a lawsuit, but I do want us to think as a board and think in terms of how do we wanna proceed and
Right.
that's all I'm asking. So is item number 8 on the consent agenda or not?
Can
I'm
I
sorry.
ask a question that if we're gonna bring it forward for a vote, I mean, right now I have a lot of questions about it. And I don't mind doing it outside this meeting, but my biggest, I cannot wrap my mind around. It says this will be multiple projects over a 5-year period to be renewed annually. So I'm looking at, if we go with this, 5 years from now, let's say if it takes effect July 1, 2019, 5 years, whatever 5 years is, we're gonna be in a number of different levels of accomplishment. I mean, or we're gonna be, maybe have almost constructed this, just begun this, done this, done this. We're at different stages of completion. It's not like everything's gonna be completed exactly 5 years from July 1, 2019. So I'm not, it seems like that we're gonna have a forever rolling ball because we're always gonna have something in the fire.
That's the way the law was written, Greg, was SPLOST.
But we're talking about one architectural firm. That's what we're talking
But see,
about.
you saying 5, you confused me when you said 5 years.
I read what was in the contract.
Mhm.
So it's renewable every year, I think is what it comes down to. Yes, Dr. Means.
I'm getting the sense that the board is uncomfortable with an agreement with one architectural firm. That's the sense that I'm getting from the discussion.
I know.
And so if that's where you are, because the point of the discussion point is to discuss it here now,
Right.
not to then bring it next week to have more discussion.
Right.
And so if it's your counsel to us that you're uncomfortable with this type of relationship, or you want us to put the RFP back out with a clause that says what type of relationship can your firm provide to students and other services, if that's A, legal, and B, something that people want to do, if that's your direction, then let's move, we can move there. I guess part of a working session is for you to give us direction.
Right.
And if you're uncomfortable with it, that's okay. This is it's fine. And then we can walk it back if that's where you want us to be.
My other question is this: how different is this from the current contract that we have with them? Was it a 5-year contract?
It's
Was
very
it
different.
3-year? So it's
Yes.
very different, and that's
It-
what's
You'll still have every time you do a job,
right,
there'll be an AIA 7.0, whatever, it's an architect owner agreement.
right,
And all we're doing is trying to get somebody that we can have respond quicker,
yes.
that know us, that know our needs, know our, requirements and everything.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do.
And I'm good with that.
Right.
Again, I just want something in return. So let's see if we can do that legally.
So what you're trying to avoid is the bidding process, which we're not involved with anyway.
Right.
See, it's kind of like hiring a new teacher every year. Okay, you got to train them. Why got to train architects and engineers? Just because they're architects and engineers, they don't know us. There's a huge value in dealing with somebody that has designed buildings for us, know our systems, know what our budgets are, so that we're getting a complete job and we're getting one that meets our needs. And I don't think out of Oglethorpe, PHL, Boyle, and Hillsman, I don't think anybody has been dissatisfied with those projects.
So are we engaged any other architectural firm right now?
No.
For any of our projects?
No, just that.
That's just them already.
Right.
And they won that through each bid on the facility.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
Dr. Mays?
So my experience is that school districts do engage in a relationship with their architectural firm. Because, and I'm not suggesting that this is the case right now, but you could have a SPLOST department that kind of craft the selection process in a way where it's going to select the same architectural firm anyway. And so what I'm used to is that that's a professional service that the school district has engaged and has, they engage with a firm that way.
So we can
And
do
so I
this.
understand your concerns about maybe the wealth not being spread across, but please note the most current 4 projects you have in place right now are all with the same architectural firm now anyway.
Because they keep winning because they already know us. So that familiarity clauses will get more and more valuable, which is why I want more out of it.
So in answer to what Linda's saying, if we were going to do another, let's say we're going to do central office, we could, if it's legal, we could put a clause in, we would be voting on that anyway, right?
If we've chosen this company under this contract, they are the architects that.
I think at this point, what we would have to gently have a conversation about is just to remind the architectural firm that we have a career academy and that we have young people who may be interested in that path. And it would be really nice if they were able to collaborate with our children. Look, but that's a very delicate conversation. Just being very transparent. In essence, what we're asking, I mean, because we could do the same with our legal firm. We could say we have kids who really want to be lawyers. What are you doing for those kids? I mean, any company that we have professional services through and with as a partnership, we could have that type of
I would
conversation.
love to do that. Yes, that's all I'm asking. And remember, we did have that construction company and they volunteered. They said, yeah, they could probably come up with a couple of internships because I asked them, right, when they gave their presentation. Now, I don't know if they ever did, but they said they could.
Yeah, other thing too, Georgia DOE recommends that you have a district architect,
Right,
because there's things that have to be certified by we have a 5-year plan we have to do.
right.
So they want your district architect that, knows your facilities and your buildings, that's the one that's advising you and certifying your plans and submissions to them as well. So it's,
I think I'm just probably a little bit hyped on Envision Athens and the fact that we're trying to build a stronger community here and we keep sending monies outside of the district. So that's me. Yes, John.
I just had a procedural clarification question. The multiple projects over a 5-year period, was there any more detail given on that? Or were they just told?
we gave them 3, sample projects that we were looking to do. Was a new elementary school of a certain size, so many students, a board office of so many square feet, renovation type thing. And I believe there was a 3rd one that was identified in the RFP as well.
And when it talks about fee structure, 20% as being part of the rating, we're talking about how an architectural firm treats their payment. And that we like the way that this, potentially at least, since they did have a much higher score, we like the way their fee structure was versus
Right.
Some of the
people, we had people that charged, 3% or say 4.5%. They're average about 5%. We had firms that wanted to charge 8%, which is really expensive. So obviously, when you're scoring it in the matrix,
right, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Consent,
No, not consent.
not consent.
Uh-uh.
All right,
I wanna
number
see what
9,
else comes up.
approved 2019 work session and regular board meeting dates. Discussion?
I'll try not to prolong it, but I just wanted to flag for everybody because I think it's important to get it on your calendars that there's some unusual dates. So the ones that were asterisks as being different, we're having our regular board meeting on February 21st. Is that to avoid Valentine's Day?
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm just asking.
I'm out of the district that on the 14th.
Oh, okay,
So that's the reason why.
I just wondered.
And then the other, so thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
I'm out of the district on the 14th, and then I believe March 14th is during spring break.
Yeah, so we just moved the
Right.
work session, and the regular board meeting, that's right.
And then this is different than what was sent out to us.
Is that right?
Yes. Yes, it is.
And then, the regular board meeting in November is the 21st and not the 14th.
Again, I may be out of the district. Which I think would have been the 14th.
Right,
Mhm.
right, so I'm really saying this for the board members, get
Thank you,
this on your
yes.
calendars.
Mhm.
And then we've got 2 extra meetings that are on May 23rd and July 18th.
Just for hiring purposes, I think we've
Right.
talked about this
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah, and that's fine.
Thank you,
That's,
yes,
that's fine again,
Mhm.
I'm just trying to make sure everybody's aware of this now so that we don't have conversations later. Get out your 2019 calendars.
So number 9, are we on consent? I'm sorry, district.
In terms of the July, when you say personnel focus, is that for the voting? Or
Yes.
not for discussion on a broad topic of personnel, but simply to come and approve?
Right, that's what we've talked about.
Okay.
And also, we've got a series of meetings about the charter that are
Yeah.
not on here, but just,
Those are separate meetings.
those are separate meetings, and that's fine. I guess just saying, everybody check your calendars because, we don't want to have people not here for those meetings.
So to your point, Dr. Knotts, between the committees that you signed up for, the work sessions, regular meetings, and then special meetings, and we have these special meetings around the charter system, yes, your calendar, welcome to the board again.
Are those listed somewhere?
The special, the charter,
I will send those 4 dates, and you signed up for them.
Oh, okay.
On the Google, and I did send out what the final 4 dates were.
But they're also on the school calendar too, are
They
they?
are, and I will make sure that the new board members.
I think I already put them in.
You know how to access the board member event calendar.
So is this a consent item?
yes.
Yay, okay, so out of the 9 enumerated items, 5, 6, and 8 are no longer on consent. So we'll vote on those separately next. 6 and
Yes.
8.
And Madam Chair, board members, just so we're clear, I want to capture, so what do you need in terms of information for 5, 6, and 8? I think I'll skip to 6 first. It sounds like Mr. Gilbert and Chief Sizemore are able to give you the addendum for the training, and I think that's what you're seeking there.
Right. Information
Yes.
about training.
Sure. With legal services, what do you need? What other information do you need answered?
I'm curious about the, because if I'm understanding this correctly, item 5 had to do with actually seeking permission to extend services. Didn't mean that we would necessarily do that.
Yes.
I'm curious about our contracts in the district. Like, are they year-long for teachers and for administrators? Do we tend to do those? I know, like, I think with teachers, they are a year. But like with, principals and more people like in administration, are those year-long contracts as well? And that's more like indirect information, but I think it doesn't really bear on whether in my opinion, whether we should go and seek permission, because that's not binding us to do that. But I think it could certainly impact my thoughts about professional services under what Dr. Knox was mentioning, that if legal services fall under professional services, and if architectural services fall under professional services, and if there are any other things that fall under professional services, for instance, our EAP, I don't know if we still have that with, at what point do we say, we know that a year contract may not put a professional in a position to offer us their best services. And if that is the case, and if that is what we're basing these decisions on, then I wonder if it has any bearing on how we look at the contracts that we offer the individuals that are working with our students directly. And so I think,
Yes.
I would like to know a little bit more about the all of the contracts that we offer in the district, are they still year long, or, you know? which
For
ones-
employees,
Yes. Mhm.
So it's-
yes, and so I think, so Dr. Gann, when you talk about employee groups, if you can help me refine it, are you talking teachers and administrators? Are there other employee groups that you would wanna hone in on?
I'm not familiar with all of the, positions that have contracts, but just off of my head.
So
I would
whoever has a
think-
contract,
Yeah, I would
Got
think
it.
like,
That's
teachers,
helpful.
counselors,
That's helpful.
psychologists.
so
district
whoever signs a
Mhm.
professional contract
Mhm.
to provide a service, working with students, how long, what's the duration of that contract?
Yeah.
I believe, but Ms. Duke isn't here, we'll connect
Is
with,
it just?
that's helpful. We'll have that information for you. I think everyone has a year-to-year contract except for the superintendent.
You're correct. You're the only one got extended contract.
And there's this.
And I'm not advocating necessarily at this particular time for or against, but I think more so as we think about it.
It's
and
fair.
We're spending a lot of money there, you know, how do we sort of balance that and how do we resolve that? That we have teachers and God forbid, we have people who don't even have contracts, but we're deciding if we're gonna decide on a professional service for 3 or 5 years. And so those would be some of the things that I think I would want to.
I can tell you with teachers all over the state of Georgia, the law not gonna allow you to give them an extended contract. 190 days, that's it.
And so I think we have to look at that and then decide what type of approach do we want to take to professional services? Because if the law won't allow us to extend teachers a contract, but we are saying that when people have some comfort and don't have to, I mean, it could go both ways.
So
You
that,
know?
again, what I think this is really interesting. And I think we've, on the periphery, have had a similar conversation as a board and an administration. We've been having this conversation for the last few months, candidly. And having worked in a union contract state, yes, I think teachers always have a year-to-year contract, but there are provisions in place that makes the employment from year to year more secure versus when you are in a right to work state is not as secure. So I think that conversation is valuable to have. This is the first district I've ever been in where administrators building principals, for example, have a year-to-year contract. And I think that would be a very healthy conversation to have if we're suggesting that legal services or architectural services are probably in a stronger space. If it's a multi-year agreement, then why wouldn't we have that same conversation for our leaders of the schools that our children are in? I think that's where you're leading the
That's sort of
conversation.
what I'm.
That's fair. We can gather that information.
Yes, Jeff.
And kind of going the other way with it, it probably would help, especially the new board members, but I think it would help me too, to understand better how the year-to-year contract is inhibiting our council and also inhibiting the ability of us to get bids from other council. Is that all anecdotal?
That's more anecdotal. And so the feedback we received during the RFP process is that legal firms are suggesting, so why would I bid on a contract that may only last 1 year? At the same time, the anecdotal piece is from current legal counsel that has shared with multiple parties that it puts them in a tenuous spot if they realize that their employment is up for review on an annual basis. So that's more anecdotal.
So the current firm that we're using, how long have they been?
For a long, Hall Smith has been with us for a long time, but I think
Since desegregation of the schools and before that, actually.
No.
38 years. was it?
Over the years, when Terry Benton was representing the school district, he was with a different law firm.
Okay.
And then somehow, I can't recall what year it changed.
so, Dr. Dytman,
And that always been all good.
I think what Mr. Worthy is suggesting is a very important point, which is sometimes school districts will say, I like this attorney. And if this attorney's pivoted from one legal firm to another,
Yeah.
then that's where maybe your services walk to another firm. But we've been with Hall Booth Smith for quite a few years.
And so every year they have to do other firms?
I'll find out. I can get that data. I'm sorry. Dr. Knox, we can find out. We'll get the exact number.
That's fine.
I'm sorry, Doctor.
So do other firms apply each year or not?
Last year was my first year with the RFP process. We did have I believe one or two other firms submit. That is really low in my experience of only one or two legal firms submitting a response for legal services.
Typically in the past, at other school systems I've worked at, it has as many as 10 to 15 apply.
Especially with our proximity to Atlanta, I was surprised by the low number. And anecdotally, again, Veronica Jackson, who does our procurement in Mr. Hamill's office, has shared that because she receives the calls during the RFP process, and people are sharing with her, why would we even submit?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can see that given that we've had the same firm for a long time, but it kind of, if we've had this firm for a long time and it hasn't been an issue, so it has been consistent, I wonder why it's necessary to change it.
I think it goes to what Dr. Gant was asking in a very sophisticated way of if we are stating that legal services and architectural services are in a more secure space to provide the best counsel possible to us in a multi-year arrangement, then that's the logic behind it. Because, and I think that's what Dr. Knox was getting to as well. We're getting anecdotally from legal counsel that it places them in a tenuous position to give the board the right, I shouldn't say right, but the counsel that they believe is the proper counsel if they know that their contract is up in the next 3 months.
Yeah, and I see that as potentially being a problem, but it doesn't seem like it's currently a problem, given that they have been retained every year. I mean, I can see that there's maybe a feeling of, well, maybe this won't last, but it's lasted so long already that.
I can only speak to my 1 year going through the process, but candidly, I think part of the conversation that we had about, so whose attorney is it? Is it the districts? Is it the boards? Is it administrations? I think all of that culture around what we just described is part of the uneasiness that legal counsel is sharing with us. That's making this a little difficult for us to retain the job on a year-to-year basis. I think you may be getting to another area, and I don't know if that's where you're trying to go with the questions, but maybe just a simple conversation around the relationship and what structure does the board want? Maybe that will suffice for this conversation, but.
Yeah, I just was sort of thinking about the current way that, since it's been the same firm for a number of years, it doesn't, and I don't know them, so maybe they don't feel this way, but it would seem like if you've gotten the contract every year, even though you have to apply for it every year, if you've gotten it every year, it wouldn't seem as temporary. It would seem like I have to do this, but I'm probably going to continue on.
I'm now really out on a limb in terms of trying to represent the feelings of legal counsel.
Yeah, I mean,
but through the conversations, I think legal counsel would say, and it's too bad that the attorney who is with us typically for our board meetings, Andrea, is here and does a lot of work with us on the special ed side. But Mike Pruitt is our main attorney that works with the board. And again, I don't want to speak for Mike, so I'm speaking for the entire firm. I think the firm would say, but it is a journey to go through the RFP response process. And the relationship is not always as conducive and as collaborative and as fluid as we would want it to be. And so when you add on top of it the process of having to apply on a year-to-year basis, that makes all of this seem very tense, where it should not be a tense relationship. It actually should be the most open and transparent and collaborative and trusting relationship that the board has with anyone other than with the superintendent.
Okay,
Truly.
great.
I've been really quiet this whole time, and I'm just gonna interject, and please forgive me. We have a code of ethics that applies to us. that essentially says that you can fire us at any time. We can't hold you to any contract for any period of time. If the board as a collective doesn't feel like we're representing the district, you can terminate. There's no security in a contract for us. I think the larger question, the question the district needs to ask is this the right allocation of staff resources going through a bidding and a procurement process on a yearly basis if you're not really thinking about moving? And I think what that's done over this period of time is signal to other providers of legal services in our community that this isn't an RFP that would even you need to respond to, because every year they go through this process, every year they re-up with Halden Smith. And so we would be wasting our time putting together presentation materials and responding to those RFPs. And I think that is some feedback that, and maybe explains why there were so few responses. But that doesn't mean that we need some kind of security in that process. I think the larger question is this the best use of your staff's time if you're not really planning on making a move, knowing that you could make a move at any point in time and get other counsel, because our fiduciary obligation is to the district itself. And so we have to follow the chain of command, and I haven't looked at Mike's letter recently, but this is an issue that frequently comes up. It's an issue about which you deserve to have clarity and have questions answered. And if you're getting opinion letters and you don't understand the factual basis that's informing them, that's a problem that we need to talk about openly and candidly to make sure that you understand what was the factual information that went into the analysis that you ultimately got as a board.
And thank you for that addition. And I guess the last thing I would add on this conversation is, and you're not hiring an attorney. So you're not hiring Mike Pruitt or Andrew, you're hiring a firm. And so that's another component to this conversation of you're hiring a bench of legal scholars who can assist you. And you really want to look at it through the lens of, so what are we seeking? Do we have a legal firm that has strong special ed background, but they also understand contract law well, and they understand HR law well? That's the type of process that you want to go through. May I suggest this? I think Dr. Gant's question of, so where are the people who actually work with our kids? What's their contract duration, and where does that sit? I think that's just valuable data for you to have. I think the other component that I'm used to in these types of situations is that if you approve or deny the ability to go through a multi-year contract, the process that I'm used to is at least having a work session where we collectively go through the construction of the RFP. So then you have the ability to weigh in as a board to say, so here's what we're looking for in an attorney. And I think we would still handle the RFP review process, but at least giving you an opportunity to weigh in to say, here's some important objectives. I think that's been missing in this process.
Absolutely.
And so if that's been missing, I think that's the reason why you're feeling
I like to have that
disconnected,
first.
right?
Yeah.
But I think we need to talk about process. And process-wise is we have to get this on the docket for the legislature soon. And if they approve it, then you can be in a position of saying, so now let's construct the RFP that we collectively want. But from a process standpoint, the first thing you have to do is to say, do we want a multi-year relationship with someone? And if so, then you approve what's in front of you. If you approve it, then I think the next step is to then sit down and construct the objectives of the RFP together.
I really like that, and I think that the way my logical mind works, and I look at me a PhD, I can tell. All right, but the way my logical mind works, yes, I'd love to see us do that. And so again, back to, we've already said number 5 is off consent, but it doesn't sound like you have any additional work to do at this time.
No, the work that I have to do is I have 2 questions to answer. One is, how long have we been with the current firm? And number 2 is, what's the duration of contracts for other employees who have contracts in our organization? So those are the questions for number 5.
Those are the 2
I've got 2
clarifications
questions.
I have. Well, we haven't gotten to your other agenda item, but is that
No,
relevant to
I've got 2
business?
questions on this.
On this one, okay, yes, sir.
Okay, one I would like to know is what other districts do. whether, from the school board association or whatever. I want to have a sense of is this typical, not typical, if we're following what the direction that school districts are going in, or school districts going on fee for service, so to speak, pay for service, and we're going the opposite way. And then the other thing is I'm wondering if there's any approach that separates legal counsel for student services, the whole special ed piece, and then legal counsel to the board. If are those always joined at the hip, or can they be represented by two different law firms? One specializing in special education law, student rights, that side.
I think the size of our district and in the region that we'll gather.
Okay.
I think that's really interesting, and I'll stop there. We'll just get the data and then we can go from there.
All right, are there other questions for number 5 so that it's 9 o'clock? Okay, all right. What about number 6? How are we doing? The question there was to provide information to Greg, and then we should be able to vote on that next week. And number 8, what is required there for us to be able to vote on this? Is there something that the district needs to provide before we vote on number 8?
It sounded to me from Linda's discussion that there was interest in the legality of what do we get back, essentially, how that can be incorporated. Is that correct?
That's great, yes.
And this may already be a part of it, so I very well may not have seen this. But under the reviewer document for number 8, the rankings, how do we, or where are the criteria that each of the firms were?
It's in the RFP.
It is in the RFP, okay.
So they've already submitted an RFP for this potential retainer.
Yes.
So we wouldn't be able to go back and change.
No, I'd have to rebid, I'd have to throw this out and rebid the whole thing.
I guess my question is, I know originally we had, on the calendar from the facilities report, we had a vote on the architectural firm for 2, and there was a price tag to that. Now that's not what we're talking about here.
The feedback the board provided me was that was really putting you in a tight spot of having to make a decision about some things that you need more discussion on. So we backed away from that model, and that's why you have what's in front of you now.
Okay, and I'm assuming that okay, so in terms of what my questions are, is I still want to, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around having a multiple year contract with an architectural firm, but still.
It's no different than what we did before, because we actually bid, you go back to the last architectural RFP, we bid multiple projects together. So we laid out and said, we need you to design these next 3 projects. Since I don't know the specific projects that we're gonna be doing, because the facility use report had several options, I just wanna get a firm on retainer, so when you guys say go, boom, I can go.
So for the 3 projects, almost 3 recent projects, we already kind of had them on retainer.
Yes, for those 3 projects.
For those 3 projects already.
Right.
But there were specific
But when we
projects.
voted for each project as we went.
When we established the construction price, we voted and say, here's the architectural contract, it's 5% of 15 million, X amount of dollars. You voted on that and you approved that architectural contract, which is over $80,000. I'm just trying to have a firm that I have on retainer, so when you guys say, we want you to go to this project, I can go to them without having to spend a whole bunch of time putting it out for RFP bid, things like that. Having all those firms submit those things, and the other firms say, well, they're just gonna give it to so-and-so like they did in the past.
But if we rejected Hillsman altogether from the first vote,
Right.
then that architectural firm wouldn't have earned any money.
Correct.
Okay, so,
So if you didn't approve their design contract, then I'd have to go back out and have to start over.
so we're good with number 8, and then number, that ends the consent.
That's correct.
Yes.
Number I on the agenda. Other agenda items, Greg, you had 2 things?
Yeah, I had 2 things real quick. One thing is, lost myself here.
Town hall.
Yeah, we have a town hall on the 31st. Am I right, Claire? Of January, and I'm under
Hold on a second. You said we, what are you talking
okay,
about?
let me back up.
Okay,
Okay.
please do.
With the permission from this board, and that's why I would like it on the agenda. The Government Relations Committee,
Okay.
okay, voted to have a town hall meeting, and I'm glad you clarified that for me, Charles, because that's right. We need a vote from the board to go ahead and to have this legislative town hall meeting, in which the school board, and that's the second part of that, is that we need to start looking at who would be willing to participate in this.
And the point of this is to present our legislative agenda to the public.
Right.
And to develop essentially grassroots support for this agenda. And so the idea is to have different board members perhaps present different parts of the agenda so that it's a collective activity, right? It represents the board. So
Right. And so, for instance, part of our legislative agenda is focusing on early learning. So we would have a board member who would have worked with the early learning staff, director, or whatever, to be able to put this forth to the public about the importance of this and how we want to go about doing this. And so we need both the cooperation of individual board members, but we also need the support of the board to even have this 31st event.
How different is that from having that presentation at our regular board meeting?
Because it would be us presenting.
Us being,
Us, the board. This is the board and the public. There's no in between.
And it would be they would be.
It will be interactive, where we can interact with this is not an official board meeting. We're not taking votes, we're not having resolutions, we're just talking about our agenda. And so the whole board would have to come up to speed in terms of what is our legislative agenda that we approved in November, and what piece of it, and there's some pieces that are more important than others because some pieces are more realistic than others. But anyway, that's something that I don't mind coordinating.
It's actually a very healthy model for the Board of Education to be the conveyors of what's important from a legislative agenda standpoint. And I think what the chair of the Government Relations Committee is asking for is the board's support in hosting a town hall meeting. I think this is also, we've had this conversation, I think board members have requested the opportunity to engage with the community in a more authentic way. This is a prime example and way for that work to happen. Right? Right.
so do we need to vote on that next week? Is
I
that,
think we need to vote to have the town hall meeting, but I think we need to, I would be, or we would be asking for folks to step forward and not just assume.
I don't know if you have to vote on it. I mean,
No.
if you set the date, you set the date, and that's your meeting. But that's your call. I mean, I don't believe that you need board action to have the Government Relations Committee have a town hall meeting to engage the public.
I guess I'm doing it more in the benefit of getting buy-in from the board so that each board
Sure.
member feels like, yeah, I voted for it, so I guess I have to
I
participate.
just wanted to clarify why you're. I just wanted to clarify why
That's
you're
not how
doing
it
it.
works.
So don't feel like you have to. Don't feel like you have to have this as an agenda. Yes, I like your strategy, sir.
All right.
it would be good to have discussion of it at the meeting in some way.
Yeah.
To give an early heads up.
so you want to have this as an agenda item for
Yes,
our
please.
next meeting?
Yes.
All right, that's
And
the
I
note
want-
that I've taken.
And then for people to
What's the
think about it. The second one is, and this just came across the desk today from Angela Palm, our Georgia School Board Association Legislative liaison. January 23rd, 9 to 3, there's a workshop in Macon on waivers with the deputy superintendent of schools there, as well as GSBA general counsel. And they're suggesting it's appropriate for superintendents, school board members, principals, whoever, the superintendent feels like it benefit from this, but it seems like it's something that I would like to see us to have a big
Is it
presence.
not a part of that, would that be a part of our discussion when we look at our charter?
It would be in preparation of it. I think it's a good.
I'll connect with Ms. Suggs to figure out what Angela sent out, and we can get a better sense of what this meeting's about.
Sure.
And move on from there.
So yeah, so
Since Claire has a relationship with Angela and with the meeting, we can get deeper clarification.
that's good.
Does this need to be on the agenda?
I would like it to be on the agenda so that we can hear
Why
what
would
we
this
found out.
rise to the agenda?
We
We
can
don't have
give
the
you,
information.
I think it could be part of the update that you provide. I think these two items will be part of your update in the Government Relations Committee.
Yeah, I don't, okay,
These could be two updates, so we'll make sure we get you the content.
so these are gonna then come under the Government Relations Committee report next week. I'm grateful. Thank you so much. Now, we are down to,
I
item,
have something.
oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, when we were talking about the approval of the school resource officer, something that has come up several times with, the community is the security at the schools, particularly Cedar shows. And I would like for us to have a discussion about where we are with the cameras working, the cameras working and what that looks like right now. How has it been improved since, our last incident?
So Dr. Maddox, I can give you an update on the status of our working cameras.
Okay.
Just to provide you an overview, about 70% of our cameras are analog cameras. I'm concerned about the state of our cameras. So they're analog quality. And I'll send the board, because this is a security issue, I'll send the board in terms of where those cameras are and which ones are digital versus analog. I think the short answer, Dr. Maddox, is that we need to invest in our infrastructure a lot more than what we currently have, not only from a camera standpoint, but just from we need deeper investment in our security infrastructure. And that was part of the feedback that we received from our security audit.
Right. I was gonna say.
But I'll make sure that you have that information.
So will you share the security audit with our new board members? That would be excellent.
Sure.
Because I don't know if we got that, but it's all there. Awesome.
I'll make sure that.
Anything else under, other agenda items? Oh, wow, this was a great meeting. Wasn't this a great meeting? All right, personnel recommendations. Does anybody have any questions? Because we don't talk about personnel recommendations as an executive session discussion. But if you have some concerns about that, then we can add an executive session to the agenda for next week. But do give a heads up to Dr. Means about what those concerns might be. And then finally, adjournment. Okay, can I just step out of my role as facilitator? Motion to adjourn. Can we get a second? Thank you, Dr. Knight.
You don't have to
Good
step
night.
out.